Shi Feng glanced back one last time, then shut the door and moved toward the silent middle-aged driver. The man said nothing as he strode ahead, and Shi Feng hurried to keep pace. Bibi Dong remained unseen until they were fully out of the Pope's palace grounds. As the carriage descended the mountain road, Shi Feng paused to look upward. Halfway up the slope, framed in the palace's grand entrance, stood a woman clad in golden papal robes and crowned like royalty. He raised his hand in a vigorous wave before climbing into the carriage. Watching them depart, Bibi Dong allowed a small, satisfied smile to flicker across her lips. Immediately, the two guards posted by the palace steps bowed low, unwilling to risk offending her. The carriage surged forward at astonishing speed, pulled by a soul beast that resembled a horse, known for both its swiftness and stamina. Before long, Shi Feng realized they had already left the boundaries of Wuhan City and were heading into unknown territory. With no other distraction, he turned to study the stern, middle-aged driver who guided their journey. Shi Feng settled into the back of the carriage and watched the silent, middle-aged man at his side. Restlessness pricked at him, and he finally spoke. "Uncle, where exactly is this concentration camp?" The man didn't answer. He sat rigidly, his face as impassive as a carved statue. Shi Feng tried again. "Uncle, what's your cultivation level?" Still no reply, only that same blank stare. "Uncle, how long until we arrive?" Shi Feng demanded. Only then did the man shift his eyes, but he still uttered nothing. Frustrated, Shi Feng fell silent and turned inward, practicing his cultivation. Training in daylight never matched the potency of night, but any progress was welcome. Even the tiniest drop of water will wear away solid rock over time. They journeyed through a barren landscape, no towns, no villages, only miles of desolate road. Yet the signs told Shi Feng they must be near Wuhan City. As day gave way to dusk, the carriage slowed. Shi Feng drew back the curtain and peered out. Before him stood a dark fortress, its walls seemingly hewn from onyx. It was smaller than any city he'd known, more a walled hamlet, yet its outer ramparts soared nearly 20 meters high. The black stones swallowed every ray of light, and even from this distance, a heavy, oppressive aura pressed on Shi Feng's chest. As the carriage creaked forward, he couldn't shake the chill that ran down his spine. Shi Feng rode in the carriage with a mounting sense of unease as they drew near the city. There wasn't a single name or sign to mark the gate, only towering walls bristling with hundreds of soldiers clad in jet-black armor. Each man wore a cold, murderous expression, and Shi Feng felt the weight of their stony gazes press down on him. He suspected at once that these were all powerful soul masters. The middle-aged man driving the carriage displayed a gleaming brass token to the guards, and they were admitted without a word. Inside, the streets branched off into bustling districts of shops, eateries, and places of amusement. But the bustle felt hollow. There were almost no adults visible. Aside from shopkeepers, every passerby was a child or teenager, each radiating the faint but unmistakable fluctuations of soul power. Whenever the carriage rolled by, these young trainees fell silent and stared, curiosity and competitive fire in their eyes. As the carriage turned onto a wider avenue, the driver finally spoke. "These youngsters," he said, sweeping his gaze over the street, "all came from training camps just like yours. Someday, they'll be your opponents in the arena." Shi Feng sat up straighter, heart pounding. He had arrived in this nameless city to test his strength, and now he could see that the competition would be fiercer than he'd ever imagined. Shi Feng's heart raced as the carriage lurched to a halt in the middle of a vast, lantern-lit square. He turned to the middle-aged driver, curiosity barely contained. "Where did all these people come from?" he asked. The driver gave him a curt nod. "They're children of the Wuhan Palace, some from its affiliated noble families, others from the Palace Academy, and a few orphans the palace itself has adopted." Shi Feng took a step out onto the cobblestones. The driver reached into his robe, produced a small leather pouch, and tossed it at him. "My mission here is complete. I hope we meet again one day." Before Shi Feng could respond, the driver clucked to his horses, and the carriage rattled away, vanishing into the throng of the city. Shi Feng stood alone, blinking in the sudden quiet. He still had no idea where he was or what lay ahead. He opened the pouch and peered inside. Hundreds of gleaming gold soul coins spilled into his palm. Relief, and a spark of excitement washed over him. Satisfied, he slipped the coins into his ring's storage space. With his first reward in hand, Shi Feng lifted his chin, steeled himself, and stepped toward the heart of the city, ready to uncover the mysteries that awaited. Shi Feng surveyed his burgeoning coin purse with satisfaction. With this much soul money at his disposal, he could afford to linger in the training grounds as long as he liked, if only he knew where to begin. He paused at a crossroads of dust-churned paths, running a hand through his hair in indecision. Suddenly, a tall, slender youth came sprinting up. He skidded to a halt, bright-eyed, and called out, "Hey there! You're here for the training exercises too, right?" Shi Feng gave a quick nod. He had no clue about the camp's unwritten rules or the best way to get started. Maybe this kid could fill him in. With a flourish, the young man produced a slim booklet from beneath his arm. "You're fresh off the boat, and this place can be confusing if you don't know the ropes. For a little extra gold, I can sell you the training camp handbook. It'll fast-track your acclimation." "How much?" Shi Feng asked, folding his arms. The youth grinned and held up all 5 fingers. 5 gold soul coins. That's it, practically a steal for what's inside. Shi Feng gave the pamphlet a once-over. It was hardly more than a dozen pages, all crammed into a flimsy cover. 5 coins for that? He stifled a laugh. 4, he said curtly, already turning on his heel. The youth's grin faltered for a moment before he waved a hand dismissively. "You drive a hard bargain, but fine. 4 it is." He slipped the booklet into Shi Feng's waiting palm, sealing the deal with a confident nod. Pocketing the handbook and his newly lighter purse, Shi Feng set off down one of the dusty lanes, eager to see whether his haggling had been worth it. Page 82. 3. 1. Shi Feng didn't even turn his head. That boy must have assumed he was an easy target. When the kid realized Shi Feng remained unmoved, his confident smirk faded. Muttering, "What a cunning little brat," he stomped off in frustration. The city streets were lined with countless shops and stalls. Feeling peckish, Shi Feng set out to find somewhere to eat, casually asking vendors for recommendations. Yet every child he encountered looked no older than 10 or 12. None seemed as grown as he was. With a small frown, he pressed on. By chance, he came across a small bookstore with a freshly posted announcement on a bulletin board. "Dear readers, our latest novel will hit the shelves at noon tomorrow, much sooner than the end of the month as originally planned. We're deeply grateful for your support and encouragement. Please bear with us. Our author writes meticulously despite a physical disability, so updates may arrive more slowly than you'd like. Thank you for your patience." Shi Feng slipped the note into his pocket, then continued down the street in search of a good meal. "I'm Shi Feng, and normally a single chapter takes me about 2 hours to write, but I still manage 3 shifts after my day job because your support gives me energy. Posting in the morning has its perks too. The higher the subscription score, the more motivated I become. I don't mind losing a little sleep or even a few more strands of hair if it means I can keep writing. I've heard bald people are the toughest of all, after all. Apart from work and knocking out chapters, I have no other hobbies, no games, no movies, so pretty much every spare minute finds me at the keyboard. Thank you, readers, for your recommendation tickets and rewards. Seeing your encouragement makes every late night worthwhile. My salary in Shenzhen's service industry bears rent and meals, so writing has become my greatest hope for a better future. I'm determined to see how far I can go and raise my monthly income. And hey, maybe I'll even find a girlfriend before I lose all my hair." Author's note: I've often heard fellow writers say that writing a novel is a dead end, but I'm stubborn enough to try anyway. Now that this book is officially on sale, I'd like to explain how subscriptions work so you know exactly how you can help. 1. Only coins you recharge yourself count as subscriptions. 2. Bookstore issued coupons do not count toward the subscription total. 3. First subscriptions are the highest number of subscriptions one chapter earns in the first 24 hours after release. If you haven't yet read the story on QQ, please download the app and spend just $1 to give me that initial subscription. It's about the price of a snack, and every single one makes a real difference. I know what it's like to be a student scraping by on cheap noodles and pirated novels, so I don't expect everyone to subscribe. But if you can, genuine subscriptions are the best way to show your support and help me keep the chapters coming. To reward your encouragement, here's the update schedule once the book is live. If first-day subscriptions exceed 500, I'll update 3 times daily. If they exceed 1,000, I'll update 4 times daily. Thank you so much for reading, and if you can, please make that first subscription tomorrow. Your support means everything to me. Chapter 63, Burglary. Shi Feng slipped into the narrow alley, where a half-dozen street toughs loitered amid the grime. They exchanged hostile glances, frowning as he approached. But when they recognized him, a lone boy of his age daring to venture here, their expressions shifted from surprise to pity. In a place like this, no one expected a child to come out alive. Shi Feng paid them no heed. He followed the alley to its end and ducked into a small noodle stand. The flickering lantern cast a warm glow over its simple wooden counter. Behind it stood the owner, a plain-looking middle-aged man with honest eyes and a gentle manner. As Shi Feng stepped forward, the man's face came in to focus, one he recognized all too well. Gathering his courage, Shi Feng spoke up. Shi Feng hesitated at the counter, 5 gold soul coins clutched in his hand. "Uncle, I just arrived and don't know the camp rules yet. Could you tell me?" The shopkeeper paused, eyeing the coins, then broke into a broad grin. "The rules here are simple. You may fight all you want, but no killing. Over by the ridge are empty cabins. If you see one unclaimed, it's yours to live in. And when training begins, you'll hear a bell. Everyone reports immediately." Shi Feng winced inwardly. 5 gold soul coins for a few sentences. Quite a price. Still, he bowed politely. "Thank you, sir." The old man's grin faded as he leaned forward. "Listen, kid, this isn't a pleasant retreat. It's a battlefield. If you slip up, you die. My advice, go home, train for a few more years, get stronger, then come back if you still want this." "I understand," Shi Feng replied calmly, turning to eat his noodles. His indifferent expression told the shopkeeper all he needed to know. The warning had fallen on deaf ears. With a resigned shake of his head, the old man moved on to serve the next customer, another eager face, another life at risk in the camp's merciless trials. Shi Feng finished his meal, handed over the money, and stepped back out into the bustling streets. He quickly noticed a citywide system. Every occupied house displayed a small wooden sign by its door, while empty homes stood bare. After a bit of searching, he found a modest building about 500 meters from the central square with no sign at all. Perfect. He claimed it, hung the marker on the door, and settled in. Training hadn't begun yet, so this would be his temporary home. He barely had time to catch his breath before a sharp knock rang on the door. Before he could answer, it burst open. 3 brash children, each no more than 10 years old, strode in. Shi Feng recognized them immediately. They'd been loitering near the square when he'd arrived. Their leader, a chubby boy with a cruel grin, stepped forward and sneered. "Hey, rookie, this place isn't meant for the likes of you. If you don't want to end up dead, you'd better hand over that pouch of money and scram." Shi Feng met the boy's glare coolly. He could sense their cultivation levels. None of them had broken through to the great Soul Master realm yet. In other words, they were nothing but street thugs playing at robbery. He allowed himself a faint smile. Let them make the first move. Shi Feng's lips curled into a sudden sneer. The burly young man at the front froze for a heartbeat, then laughed derisively. "We're all Soul Masters here, kid. You haven't even reached that level yet. Seriously, are you planning to put up a fight?" Shi Feng stepped forward, his grin widening. "That's right," he replied coolly. "I intend to." Shi Feng's words had barely left his lips when his fist, crackling with electric blue arcs, slammed into the chubby boy's abdomen. With a muffled grunt, the boy arced through the air, sailing nearly 10 meters before slamming onto the hard ground and lying still, unconscious. "Brother!" The 2 remaining youths stared in horror, their faces draining of color. "You're looking for death." They bared their teeth in anger, and in perfect synchrony, released their martial souls. One manifested as a snarling tiger, the other a spotted leopard, both beasts radiating fierce power. Above each youth's head floated a gleaming, century-old spirit ring, a testament to their status as attack-type battle spirit masters. Just as the legends about the Wuan Temple predicted, even the lowest-ranking inmates boasted ancient spirit rings. With a roar, the tiger-spirited youth lunged at Shi Feng, claws extended, while the leopard-spirited youth flanked him from the side. Shi Feng barely flinched. He'd long since cemented his place in the Soul Master realm and had already proven himself against far stronger opponents, Qian Renshui included. Without even calling forth his own soul spirit, he stepped forward. Crack! His fist met the tiger boy's charging shoulder in an explosive collision. The youth's triumphant snarl froze mid-roar as ribs cracked, and he hurtled backward in a screaming arc. He crashed to the ground, rolling to a stop, breath gone, eyes wide with shock. Shi Feng stood unmoved, pulse steady, ready for the next challenge. Shi Feng's opponent fared no better. With a single devastating punch, Shi Feng sent the youth reeling backward. My hand! Ah! The boy wailed. Nearby, the youth channeling tiger spirit energy let out a bestial howl, while his companion, possessed of leopard spirit power, felt his jaw dislocate with an echoing crack. A few teeth flew free, and his spiritual aura collapsed inward, leaving him frozen in sheer terror. Get out! Shi Feng snarled. In an instant, his features sharpened, muscles rippled, and he unleashed a thunderous roar that shook the street lamps overhead. Confronted by this terrifying, almost demonic figure, the two surviving youths abandoned their fallen boss and fled in panic. Once they disappeared into the alley, Shi Feng's form relaxed back into its human guise. A cold smirk curved his lips. Even with their soul enhancement skills, they'd been utterly no match for his punch. Pathetic. A squad of lawkeepers strolled past moments later, and seeing the three figures scatter, simply glanced the other way. Here, as long as no one was killed, roughhousing wasn't their concern. Later that evening, after grabbing a quick meal, Shi Feng wandered the streets. Apart from the heavily guarded districts, he systematically surveyed every corner of the city, always on the lookout for his next challenge. Shi Feng scanned the square and estimated there were nearly 100 young soul masters gathered here, boys and girls alike, ranging from novices to mid-tier practitioners. Not a single great soul master in sight. The other teenagers watched him with thinly veiled pity, mockery, and disdain. After all, what danger could a 6-year-old possibly pose? He'd shown up in their territory and was practically begging to be taken down. He strolled past a gleaming, ivory-hued building when 3 familiar faces burst through its doors. It was the trio who'd broken into his home that afternoon. The instant they spotted Shi Feng, their confident sneers vanished. Their eyes widened, their skin drained of color, and, like feet greased with oil, they bolted in full sprint. Shi Feng didn't bother giving chase. What truly caught his interest was the curious fact that the three were completely unscathed. Their wounds, which had been obvious just hours before, had already healed. He pushed open the pearly doors and stepped inside. The lobby was filled with injured teens, some leaning on crutches, others nursing fresh bruises and cuts. Each had paid a hefty fee for treatment, and a roster of healing soul masters move D among them, silently channeling restorative soul energy to mend flesh and bone. Shi Feng folded his arms and watched, taking note of every casualty and cure. If even these proud cultivators were willing to pay for an outsider's healing, something significant must be happening beneath the city's polished surface, and he intended to find out what it was. Shi Feng surveyed the gathering. A handful of healing soul masters had already shown themselves, some at the formidable 2-ring rank, a few at the 3rd ring level, and a couple who hadn't revealed their true strength yet. Their exact cultivation levels remained a mystery. With a slight shake of his head, he turned away. Back at his lodgings, Shi Feng opened his ring space and found it stocked with every essential: dried provisions, bottled water, and an assortment of wilderness survival gear, ropes and grappling hooks, a compact tent, torches, daggers, even a pair of short swords. He'd remembered Hulina's warning that their upcoming training would test their ability to endure and survive in the wild. Spotting dozens of outfitting shops in the city had made it easy to assemble the supplies he needed. In the streets outside, townsfolk buzzed with excitement. Many of the younger cultivators, teenagers and young women especially, were already forming small teams, chattering about how they'd support one another through the trials, coordinate their advances, and cover each other's retreats. By eavesdropping, Shi Feng learned that the official start of their rigorous training was set for tomorrow morning. A surge of anticipation warmed him, The real test was just hours away, and he couldn't wait to prove himself. Chapter 64. The gathering dawn had barely broken when Shi Feng emerged from meditation, the first light of morning filtering through his window. After quickly finding a small eatery and downing a steaming breakfast, he made his way to the city's central square. He wasn't the first to arrive. Clusters of young men and women were already gathered, waiting patiently. As the sun's earliest rays spilled over the rooftops, a deep, resonant bell tolled through the streets, its sound echoing into every alley. Almost at once, a surge of figures, novice cultivators, many still in their teens, streamed toward the square. In under 5 minutes, well over 100 participants had assembled before the elevated platform at its center. Only then did Shi Feng grasp just how large this special training session would be. He counted roughly 130 eager faces, and as his gaze swept the crowd, he detected several formidable auras, far beyond novice level and unmistakably unhidden, great soul masters. He allowed himself a small, approving smile. It seemed even this early in the discipline, the organizers had spared no effort to challenge them all. Shi Feng folded his arms and settled in, quietly anticipating what lay ahead. Shi Feng frowned as the press of bodies forced him through the bustling square. Talent scouts and young prodigies from across the realm had gathered here today, so it was only natural that a few top-ranking soul masters would appear, but being jostled like this was infuriating. "Jesus, watch where you're going, shrimp!" barked one hefty brute who nearly stepped on him. Before Shi Feng could retort, the man disappeared into the crowd. If only he'd said, "Maybe you'd see me if you looked down once in a while," but the throng swept him along too fast. All around him, towering youths, mostly girls who stood half a head taller, pressed inward, and he narrowly avoided being trampled more than once. His temper flared, but there was nothing to do but let the flow of people carry him onward. Finally, he arrived before the raised platform at the center of the square. A middle-aged man, about 50, stood there with calm, measured breathing, an unmistakable aura of power surrounding him. Behind the man stood a line of attendants, young and old alike, each radiating respect. As Shi Feng followed the tide of spectators, a sudden ripple of energy swept over him. The feeling was subtle, but impossible to ignore, a strange, compelling presence that stirred something deep within his soul. He paused, trying to pinpoint its source, even as the crowd surged forward around him. Shi Feng's expression flickered with confusion. A strange sensation pulsed through him, as if something within him was calling out, something that felt like blood, yet wasn't. He had barely begun to focus on where it was coming from when the middle-aged man on the stage spoke, snapping him back to attention. The man pressed both hands onto the podium, and a crushing aura surged outward, sweeping across the gathered candidates like a collapsing mountain. Boys and girls gasped as the weight of it bore down on them, and the entire courtyard fell into an immediate hush. His gaze swept over the audience, and anyone who dared look back was forced to lower their eyes under his steely scrutiny. "I'll give you 30 seconds to form 2 orderly lines," he commanded. At his words, the crowd shifted. Shi Feng, who had been near the back, felt a gentle shove and found himself propelled forward into the front row, directly in the center. He looked up at the man on stage. Ordinary in appearance, much like the uncle who had brought him here, the man's face was unreadable, his expression cool and detached. Yet under something so commonplace, Shi Feng was certain, lay something far more extraordinary. Half a minute passed, and the students were already standing in formation. A deep, resonant voice cut through the hush. "I am your chief instructor, Long Shan." His words carried an almost explosive force, as if each syllable could shake them to their cores. Whispers rippled through the ranks, some voices trembled with fear, others with disbelief. "My God, he's the most ruthless of the 3 head instructors. I can't believe he's ours." He was in charge last term. Over 100 trainees nearly died, only 3 made it out alive. The other instructors barely fail half the class. This guy doesn't even let half survive. "Mom, I want to go home. I heard there was some kind of accident." Shi Feng's heart pounded as he listened to the rumors swarming around him. He shifted on his spot, gaze fixed forward. Long Shan paid no mind to the panic whispering behind him. After a measured 2 seconds, the instructor's voice rang out again. This is your final opportunity. Anyone who wishes to withdraw, step forward now. A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant rustle of nervous breath. Shi Feng stood perfectly still, weighing his next move. If you don't quit now, there are only 2 possible outcomes: pass or die. A collective shiver ran through the group. Faces went pale. A few of the trainees exchanged uneasy glances, then slipped away in silence. When the departures finally stopped, only 10 figures remained. Longshan surveyed them with cold approval. 10. Eopal, your resolve surpasses my expectations. Let's begin roll call. He stepped aside, and a young woman strode forward. Her lithe figure, cinched at the waist, swayed with each step, drawing startled looks from the onlookers. Clad in snug blue leggings that accentuated every curve, she smiled as she addressed the group. I'm one of your assistant instructors. You may call me Ching Ching. When you hear your name, respond with present. Understood? Her voice was as smooth as silk, yet carried a sharp edge, like a serpent coiled to strike. She flicked her gaze over the trainees and began. Miao Renfeng. Present. One by one, she ticked off the names, never pausing longer than necessary. At last, she reached the final name on her list. Shi Feng. A soft, almost childlike voice replied. Present. Several heads turned. Ching Ching, who had been looking down at her roll sheet, lifted her eyes to meet his. Curiosity rippled across her face as she studied the boy, whose voice betrayed a vulnerability at odds with this harsh selection trial. Shi Feng stood among the other recruits as Ching Ching scanned the roster one last time. She hesitated when her eyes drifted over a 6-year-old boy, so young, yet here, and Shi Feng caught the brief flicker of curiosity in her gaze before she looked away. When Ching Ching called out his name, he noticed Chief Instructor Longshan glance in his direction, lingering for an instant. Shi Feng reminded himself, this must be the instructor the headmaster mentioned. I need to seize any chance to ask him for advice. Ching Ching cleared her throat. We started with 130 candidates. 10 dropped out before today, leaving 11 of you. The youngest is 6 years old, the oldest, 20. That's everyone. She snapped the roster shut and drifted back to stand with the other assistant instructors. Her black tights swished as she moved, drawing stunned stares, and more than a few flushes of teenage envy from the assembled recruits. Longshan stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the group. This training program may last up to 3 years, he began. You'll be taught by 7 instructors, myself included. One thing you must remember, no matter how deep your hatred runs, once you cross back into the city, any act of killing will be treated as outright murder. He paused, letting the warning hang in the air. Then he added, your first exercise begins in 30 minutes. And make no mistake, if you think you can breeze through this phase on raw talent alone, 80% of you will fail. Or worse, you won't walk away at all. Ching Ching's voice cut through the tense silence. Line up now for your preliminary assessments. For Shi Feng and every other recruit gathered here, that order marked the start of a gauntlet far deadlier than any of them had imagined. You're dismissed. Team formation begins now. We'll depart in 30 minutes. The instructor's voice rang out across the training ground. An eager buzz rose from the assembled recruits. After enduring the savage first-day drills, far more brutal than any rumors of Longshan's harsh reputation had suggested, they were determined to band together with the strongest partners they could find. In an instant, clusters of trainees sprang to life. Voices overlapped. I specialize in longbow tactics. My dual-wielding swordsmanship is unmatched. Everyone was on the hunt for the most capable allies, each hoping to secure a competitive edge before they set out. Shi Feng hung back at the edge of the plaza, calmly observing the scramble. He'd been through far harsher challenges and knew that true strength revealed itself not in boastful introductions, but in actions. With 30 minutes on the clock, he planned to wait for someone who could match his skill, and perhaps even learn something in the process. Shi Feng wove his way through the bustling crowd, his senses straining for that strange pull he'd felt earlier. Finally breaking free, he spotted a small cluster of 7 people not far off. At its center stood a young woman whose presence radiated like the moon surrounded by stars. The moment Shi Feng laid eyes on her, his heart skipped a beat. This was the source of that magnetic draw, and she was clearly a powerful soul master. She stood just over 5 feet tall, and even now that Shi Feng had straightened his posture, he barely reached her chest. Intriguingly, he only detected 2 great soul master auras in the group, hers and another belonging to one of the 6 people flanking her. That second aura came from a tall, straight-backed boy with soft gray hair and a strikingly handsome face. He gazed up at the girl with open admiration. They were deep in conversation. Every so often, the girl would cover her mouth to stifle a laugh, her youthful beauty drawing appreciative glances from the teenagers milling around them. Behind Shi Feng, murmurs of curiosity and speculation rippled through the onlookers. He took a slow breath. This encounter was only beginning. "Don't stare, brother," someone murmured as they passed. "That beauty over there is Xiaoxue, one of the 5 heavenly kings of this training camp. She's the Academy's prize student, already achieved great soul master rank. Think you can compete with her?" Another newcomer gaped. "We're all the same age. How did she advance so fast? And what are the 5 heavenly kings?" "She's a born genius," the first student explained. "You must be new here. In our class, 5 students have already become great soul masters. Everyone calls them the 5 heavenly kings. Zhao Yuyoi is one. The young man she's talking to is another. His name is Lin Feng. So that leaves 3 more. All males, each stronger than the last. They haven't shown up yet, but you'll meet them soon." A faint smile curved Shi Feng's lips. 5 heavenly kings, huh? I'm intrigued. With that, he stepped forward toward Zhao Yue. Since the chief instructor recommended forming a team, Shi Feng knew this trial must be too tough to tackle alone, and to be honest, he wasn't great at solo runs anyway. He was also curious about what made this girl so special. Gathering his courage, he strode over to the circle of 7 students. He was so much shorter than they were that he had to tilt his head way back just to meet their eyes. "Still looking for one more teammate? Mind if I join?" he asked, his voice small but steady. The group fell deathly silent. One by one, the 7 lowered their heads and stared at him. Their expressions shifted from surprise to outright disbelief. "Are you kidding me? Instructor, Qing mentioned 6-year-old trainees earlier. I thought she was joking," one of them muttered. "That kid's hardly out of diapers. Is this training or a death sentence?" Another scoffed. Shi Feng's brow furrowed, but he didn't back down. "So, can I still join you?" Lin Feng, one of the famed 5 heavenly kings, snorted with contempt. "Beat it, kid." Laughter rippled through the rest of the group. "Go home and finish your milk, little boy," someone jeered. Unfazed, Shi Feng squared his shoulders and met their taunts head-on. A grin touched his lips. He wouldn't let their scorn drive him away. "Do you expect us to babysit you, like some useless baggage? We don't have the strength to protect you. Find another team." "Yeah, move it. Don't block our way," another voice added sharply. Shi Feng said nothing. He met the girl's cool, impassive gaze. He'd thought maybe a woman would show some mercy, but Zhao Yu, her delicate, oval face framed by dark hair, offered him only cold indifference. The easy smile she'd worn when speaking with Lin Feng a moment ago was gone. With nothing left to say, Shi Feng stepped aside. He glanced back and saw Zhao Yue laughing lightly at something Lin Feng had said. Frustration churned in his chest. They treated him like a stray dog, looking down on him for being young and alone. If he weren't so concerned about drawing attention, he would have released his martial soul already. But Hu Lina had warned him firmly not to unveil his spirit rings in public. Doing so would inspire nothing but fear, and mark him as a target everyone would rush to kill. Shi Feng stood his ground, eyes flicking over the rows of teams assembled at the recruitment stations. More than 100 pairs of calculating gazes followed his every move, each hoping to exploit the slightest hint of weakness. It was intensely irritating, but he refused to show even a trace of nervousness. For what felt like an eternity, he stepped forward to ask the most promising squads for a spot, only to be politely, or sometimes bluntly, turned away. Rejection after rejection, he finally had no choice but to retreat to the fringe of the arena. He settled onto the dusty ground, small and solitary against the sea of competitors, a lone figure that looked every bit the underdog. He clenched his fists, lips curling into a defiant smile. "All right," he whispered to himself. "If none of you want me on your team, I'll do it by myself. I'll take down every last one of you solo. Just wait and see how you like that. From the elevated judging platform, Instructor Qingqing couldn't help but notice the lone boy. She leaned toward her colleague Long Shan, concern in her voice. Boss Long, look at him. He can't be more than 6 years old, can he? He certainly hasn't reached the Soul Master realm. She shook her head, frowning. He's far too young for this kind of competition. Send him in. Do you want to assign a team to escort him? Long Shan shook his head. No, that boy's background isn't simple. He was placed here at such a young age. Chances are he was born with full soul power. Instructor Qingqing's scarlet lips parted in stunned disbelief. Our training camp's been around for years, and we've never seen anyone with true innate soul power. If that's the case, shouldn't we? Long Shan cut her off with a dismissive wave. Don't worry about it. Even if he doesn't make it, it won't be on our conscience. Qingqing fell silent, sympathy swelling for Shi Feng. All the other youngest recruits were already 8. At just 6 years old, Shi Feng could barely understand what was happening. How could they expect such a child to survive under these conditions? 30 minutes later, Long Shan's voice boomed across the training field. Line up in 2 columns and follow me. No soul power. If anyone secretly uses their martial soul or falls behind, they'll answer to my whip. At his command, an assistant instructor stepped forward, whip in hand, and the first group of children braced themselves for the grueling run ahead. A voluptuous woman in her 30s stood before them. Dark energy crackled around her right hand as she summoned a long black whip. A cruel smile curved her lips, and with a single flick the whip lashed out, striking the plaza's stone floor with a thunderous bang. The impact sent spiderweb cracks racing across the surface. Don't worry, the plump assistant called out, her laughter trembling. My sister's very gentle with the whip. A collective gasp went up from the young cultivators. They spun on their heels and sprinted after Instructor Long Shan, who was already striding ahead atop a speeding flatbed carriage. On the carriage, Long Shan, her whip coiled at her side, stood with impeccable posture, hands clasped behind her back as she watched the pack approach. From the rear of the line came the sharp crack of leather, immediately followed by pained screams. Every runner who lagged even a step felt the sting and leaped forward, as if the pain itself were launching them ahead. Shi Feng's heart thundered in his chest. He watched in mounting alarm as each of his comrades passed the carriage, clutching their sore behinds and grimacing. He forced his legs into a faster pace, unwilling to be the next to taste the whip. Around him, the teenagers pushed themselves frantically, desperate to stay just out of reach of that crack and sting. Jogging along the flank, Instructor Qingqing glanced at Shi Feng in surprise. She had assumed the 6-year-old prodigy would trail behind. After all, no matter how extraordinary his cultivation talent, his slight frame hardly seemed built for this kind of endurance test. A flush of frustration warmed Shi Feng's cheeks. He glanced to his right and realized the attractive female instructor there was watching him intently, her eyes alight with curiosity at his unexpected speed. Chapter 66, Arrival at the Destination. Shi Feng couldn't resist smoothing his hair and touching his cheek. Am I really that handsome? He mused, half joking. Do people fall for me at first sight? He stole another glance at the female instructor riding beside him. She offered him a warm smile and gave a slight nod. Then, leaning in so that no one else could overhear, she slipped something into his hand. Opening his palm, Shi Feng discovered a slender dagger with a faint blue sheen etched along its blade. It's a poison dagger, she whispered in her soft, hushed voice. Only use it if you have no other choice, self-defense. Shi Feng bowed in gratitude, carefully tucking the weapon into his ring. It was unthinkable to refuse an instructor's gift. Thank you, he said quietly. At the same moment, Qingqing, another member of their group, fell into step at his side. She offered him no words, but her steady presence spoke volumes. Her quick, discreet glance had ensured only a handful of instructors caught sight of the exchange. The other students remained blissfully unaware. Qingqing's silent support was all she could give. In her heart, she prayed that this untested newcomer wouldn't be the first to fall on their expedition. With Shi Feng now armed, however covertly, the troop pressed on. The path ahead wound through a dense forest, and as the light shifted beneath the canopy, the the instructors signaled for caution. Within half an hour, the column's pace had slowed noticeably. Leaves crackled under hoof and boot, and every rustle in the underbrush set nerves on edge. The destination lay just beyond their reach, and for Shi Feng, the real test was only beginning. Shi Feng gritted his teeth and fell into step with the rest of the cadre, his pace measured and unhurried. Around him, the crack of whips met flesh with a sizzling sting. Each lash seared the skin as though it were on fire, yet somehow not a single tear appeared in anyone's uniform. The runners gasped and stumbled, sweat blurring with tears as the chain of punishment swept from the front of the line to the rear. No matter how the pace surged or flagged, Shi Feng remained anchored squarely in the middle of the formation, his breathing even, his stride unshakable. Even as the others' legs began to tremble and their faces went pale, he looked as though he could keep going all day. Watching from the carriage trailing behind the group, Qingqing and Longshan exchanged astonished glances. Neither had any real knowledge of Shi Feng's capabilities, only that he'd been personally assigned by the Pope. Longshan, tasked with supervising Shi Feng during training and piping every progress report back to the Vatican, had assumed these privileges were born of nepotism or church politics. After all, the Pope could easily have sent a more proven warrior. But seeing Shi Feng endure blow after blow without so much as flinching, their opinion of him soared. Qingqing's eyes widened with respect. Longshan settled back in his seat, a new curiosity stirring in his chest. Was this unassuming young man truly as formidable as the Pope believed? For the first time, he resolved to watch Shi Feng more closely, both to gauge his true strength and to ensure every success or failure found its way into that report. Shi Feng fell into step well behind Longshan, his sharp eyes sweeping over the 5 great soul masters who strode ahead like triumphant conquerors. These were the famed 5 heavenly kings, each of them elite among elites, yet with every measured pace, faint beads of sweat betrayed their effort. They'd streaked past the main body of troops, forming a small, self-styled vanguard that seemed more intent on one-upmanship than on unity. At the forefront of that group, Lin Feng and Zhao Yuyue walked side by side, whispering and laughing as if on a leisurely stroll. Every so often, they would turn their heads, casting scornful glances at the army behind them, an unspoken reminder, perhaps, of their superior status. Shi Feng couldn't help a wry curl of his lips. They might look relaxed now, but it showed a certain fragility. He'd seen too many pretenders crack under a fraction of the strain he'd endured. Only an hour into the march, and already these 5 kings trembled on the brink of fatigue. Their breathing was just a hair's breadth away from ragged. Their shoulders dipped with the weight of unspent soul power. Shi Feng remembered a time when he'd hauled 1,000 jin millstone all morning, and that without ever tapping into his own soul energy. Amateurs, he thought, amusement flickering at the corner of his eyes. Let them flaunt their swagger and their forced grins. Sooner or later, every one of them would pay for the weakness they tried so hard to conceal. And when they did, Shi Feng would be more than ready. The once tight formation had stretched into a long line, and Shi Feng found himself walking more than running in the middle of it. At this pace, he thought, he might as well be taking a leisurely stroll. Just then, Qingqing's soft voice drifted back to him. "Aren't you tired?" Shi Feng shook his head and offered a relaxed smile. "I used to run a lot. At this speed, I could go on all day." "That's impressive," Qingqing admitted, sounding genuinely surprised. From his calm breathing and easy tone, she had no doubt he was telling the truth. "If you're not tired, why don't you head up front?" A hint of amusement crept into Shi Feng's voice as he replied, "Those 5 ahead look like they're about to collapse, but they'd never admit it. It's easier to drop back and keep a steady pace with everyone else. If I surged ahead, I'd probably earn nothing but jealous stares." Qingqing giggled. "You're witty. I like that." Shi Feng smiled faintly to himself, still a little puzzled by his own situation. He'd always expected to remain single, yet somehow beautiful women treated him as if he were a rare treasure. He just couldn't make sense of it. No way, Shi Feng thought, astonished. A stunning instructor, whom he'd known for less than 2 hours and barely exchanged more than a few sentences with, had just confessed she liked him. His pulse skipped. At that moment, there was a dull thud behind him. He spun around and saw another recruit collapse, her legs giving out. Two instructors hoisted her like a lifeless sack and tossed her into the supply carriage lumbering at the end of the column. Already, more than a dozen recruits had fainted, most of them girls. Their endurance had never been great, and after enduring whip cracks that seemed to strike their very souls, they had nothing left to keep them standing. Shi Feng gasped for breath as the instructor finally lowered her whip. The rest of the group was a wreck, shoulders heaving, legs trembling. Any of them could collapse at the slightest provocation. Clearly, another lash would do more harm than good. After what felt like 2 endless hours, the edge of a forest came into view. "We're here," Qingqing announced, a triumphant smile brightening her face. At her signal, Longshan came to a halt. The 5 young men with him almost staggered to their knees, faces ashen, but they managed to stay upright. Longshan surveyed the clearing and said in a calm, steady voice, "Rest for 2 hours. After that, I will explain the next phase of your training." Hardly had he spoken when several of the trainees crumpled to the ground, oblivious to the dust rising around them. Shi Feng leaned over to Qingqing and asked, "What sort of training comes next, Sister Qingqing?" Qingqing ruffled his hair affectionately and flashed a playful grin. "Oh, little brother, you're too curious," she teased. "I can't just tell you now. Where's the fun in that?" With a flirtatious sway of her hips, she drifted back to join Longshan. Shi Feng watched her go, his cheeks warm with embarrassment. He glanced at the other boys. They all wore the same sheepish, flushed expression. Suddenly, he fully appreciated why they'd been so awkward around Qingqing. The distant chirping of cicadas filled the pause in their training, and for the first time, Shi Feng allowed himself to relax, if only for a couple of hours. Shi Feng glanced down at the uniform they'd issued. Plain blue, nothing more. He smirked. If he'd been a few years older, 2 hours of intense exercise might have left his nose bleeding, but so far, he felt perfectly fine. A quick glance behind him confirmed he wasn't alone. Several of the other trainees were dabbing at their nostrils, embarrassed by their sudden nosebleeds. Shrugging, Shi Feng wandered over to a patch of shade and sat down. He opened his personal ring, took out his ration pack and water flask, and began to eat. It was nearly noon. After 2 straight hours of grueling drills, plus some unknown challenges still to come, he needed every calorie. Calling on his soul power, he accelerated his body's natural recovery, watching his fatigue melt away. All around him, students were reuniting with their teammates, comparing scrapes and bruises with equal measures of pride and relief. The ones who'd collapsed earlier had already been revived by the instructors, and were now receiving care from the medics to help them regain their strength. Shi Feng leaned back against a tree trunk and let his gaze wander to the forest that bordered the training ground. Tall iron fences ringed the tree line, and squads of soul masters paced the perimeter, their eyes scanning every shadow. Soul beasts in there, he thought, nodding to himself. The fences and the patrols made the intention obvious. Whatever lurked inside those woods was not meant to come out, and it was his job to be ready, no matter what the next trial might bring. Chapter 67, Through the Jungle. Shi Feng's gaze flickered to the dark thicket beyond the clearing. Could this be the next phase of their trial, entering the forest itself? Though he'd already achieved the rank of 14th level Soul Master, he'd never once confronted a soul beast. The thought sent a thrill through him. 2 hours had slipped away in silence. Many trainees still clutched their chests, recovering the last ounces of their spirit power, but by and large, everyone had regained enough to stand. At that moment, Longshan's baritone bark cut through the air. "Get up!" Like a single mechanism springing to life, the group snapped to their feet and fell into ranks. Longshan paced before them, his arms folded. Tired from the run just now? His challenge boomed across the field. He swept his gaze over every face. Anyone want to quit? Not a soul stirred. Even those who'd collapsed earlier remained rooted in place. Longshan's thin lips curved into a faint smile of approval. "Good. I see you're right, all prepared to face death. That's a start, but it isn't nearly enough. Only those who have looked death squarely in the eye and endured it earn the right to be called truly strong." He turned and pointed toward the forest line, where tangled trees and creeping vines swallowed the daylight. "Your next trial lies within that jungle. Its terrain is treacherous, its paths intentionally misleading. Once you cross into that shadow, soul beasts will be everywhere. Your mission: hunt down these beasts and bring back proof. Fail, or return empty-handed, and you won't be welcome in my ranks. A hush fell over the group. Most had suspected the forest would be the crucible of this stage, but hearing Longshan confirm it left a cold knot in every trainee's stomach. Shi Feng inhaled deeply, feeling his excitement sharpen into determination. He'd been waiting for this moment. Stepping forward, he flexed his spirit core, ready to push both skill and will to their limits. Beyond those trees lay unknown dangers, and a chance to rise above them all. As the line wavered into motion toward the jungle's edge, Shi Feng's heart beat like a war drum. Whatever lay ahead, he would meet it head-on. This was his chance to prove himself, and nothing would stand in his way. Instructor Longshan cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the gathered students. Beyond that gate lies a forest teeming with 100-year-old soul beasts. Your task is straightforward. Enter through the gate behind me and emerge from the far side within 3 days. The first 5 who complete this trial will earn my personal assistance in hunting a soul beast to claim a new soul ring, vital for your next breakthrough. Anyone else who succeeds must team up with classmates to hunt down a suitable beast. Your performance will be ranked, and those points will factor into your final Spirit Hall evaluation, determining your standing once you graduate. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Fail to return in 3 days, and you'll score 0. All right, go. I'll be waiting on the other side, eager to see who dazzles me. With that, Longshan stepped aside. A moment of tense silence passed, then the students exchanged determined glances and surged toward the forest gate. Excitement rippled through the group as they broke into a run. Shi Feng hung back at the rear, unmoved by the scramble. 3 days was plenty of time. After all, venturing through these woods without careful planning was a recipe for disaster, and patience could prove its own advantage. Shi Feng watched the others disappear into the forest and smiled to himself. Even if they'd been given 1 more day to prepare, they'd had nothing to worry about. As the instructor had warned, this place teemed with century-old soul beasts, and century-old could mean anything from a mere 100 years to nearly 1,000. Clearly, striking out alone would be reckless. Forming a team was the only sensible choice. He decided it was best to let the stronger members take point, clear a path, and handle the brunt of the danger. Shi Feng would simply follow in their wake, ready to reap the rewards of their hard work. Once the group had plunged into the trees, Shi Feng strolled back toward the gateway. Suddenly, Qingqing's long legs appeared beside him in 2 quick strides. "Little brother, wait up!" she called. He stopped and looked at her warily. Qingqing had always been fiercely protective of him, and for good reason. He was barely her height from waist to thigh. "If you run into trouble you can't handle, find a place to hide," she said, her tone softening. "We'll search the area for 3 days. If we don't return sooner, come meet us at this gate and we'll rescue you." Shi Feng nodded earnestly. "Thank you, Sister Qingqing. I understand." He forced himself to meet her eyes, despite feeling as small as he looked. With that reassurance, Qingqing turned and dashed after the others. Shi Feng breathed a quiet sigh, tucking the gate's promise safely in his mind before slipping in behind his comrades. "Alri, let's go," Qingqing said with a warm smile. "Once you're out, my sister will take you to dinner." Shi Feng nodded, took a deep breath, and vanished into the dense jungle. "Sister Qingqing," called a plump woman armed with a leather whip, ambling over with a teasing grin. "Why are you being so generous to that kid? Could he be your secret child?" Qingqing laughed and shook her head. "I'm not married, and he's certainly not mine. I just can't stand the thought of him dying." As she spoke, another thought flickered through her mind. His innate soul power is astonishing. If he survives, he'll rise through the ranks of the Spirit Hall, perhaps even become an elder one day. By the time everyone else recognizes his talent, it'll be too late to forge an alliance with him. She caught the whip wielder's curious glance and smiled mysteriously. "Trust me," she said softly, "you'll want to remember his name." The woman with the leather whip let out a soft sigh. "He really is a fine-looking lad, about the same age as my own boy. I don't know what family would send someone so young into this." "Enough chatter," Longshan cut in, glancing toward the opposite edge of the clearing. Let's move over there and wait. One of the male instructors chuckled as he hoisted his spear onto his shoulder. Boss Long, those brats aren't going to show up anytime soon. You still owe us a feast from last time. Longshan grinned. Don't worry, tonight's on me. The instant Shi Feng stepped beneath the forest canopy, he felt the air grow cool and heavy with earth and pine. Towering trunks, each as broad as a man's chest and easily 20 meters high, rose on all sides, their branches blotting out much of the sky. Underfoot, brambles and ferns tangled together, and somewhere in the gloom, a distant roar echoed like thunder. Curiosity sparked in Shi Feng's chest. The other trainees had pressed ahead hours before, and only muffled shouts drifted back to him now. With a single bound, he vaulted over a fallen log and slipped between two stunted rhododendrons, moving so silently that the undergrowth barely stirred. On he went, his steps light and precise, winding through the thicket with ease. A few hundred meters in, he rounded a bend and froze. There, sprawled across a patch of moss and broken branches, lay a colossal beast. Its scale-covered hide shimmered faintly in the dappled light, and its chest rose and fell in slow, thunderous breaths. Shi Feng's heart quickened. The real trial, it seemed, had just begun. Shi Feng paused at the edge of a small clearing, staring down at the enormous corpse before him. Yellow and white fur, mottled and bristled from the struggle, covered the fallen beast's muscular frame. A golden soul ring hovered silently above its flank, pulsing with a steady glow. So this is a soul beast, he murmured, curiosity sharpening his gaze. He circled the tiger's body, noting its immense size, far larger than any soul beast he remembered from his past life. Power swirled in his palms as he wove a thin veil of dark mist. With a flick of his wrist, the mist snaked toward the floating ring. The ring responded, tracing lazy arcs in the air, but despite its gravity toward his aura, it refused to draw near enough to snatch. Shi Feng let out a soft chuckle. So that's how hunters absorb spirit rings. With a small shake of his head, he tore his attention away and sprinted back along the forest trail. Fallen beasts lay scattered beneath the dense canopy, dozens of souls lingering just beyond release. If these had truly been century-old soul beasts, they should have put up more of a fight. Instead, freshly torn tufts of fur and ragged wounds told a different story, and the scraps of torn clothing littered among them spoke of young cultivators who'd suffered setbacks of their own. Determined to rejoin his peers, Shi Feng pushed on. The undergrowth grew thinner, the trees more widely spaced. Branches whipped past his shoulders, dirt splashed beneath his boots. At last, the jungle opened onto a wide, rushing river. Panting, he slowed his pace and scanned the opposite bank. A line of 120 figures, battle soulmasters all, stood arrayed along the shore. Their cultivated auras burned brightly in the afternoon light. Shi Feng's pulse quickened. He had finally caught up. He took a steadying breath. Ahead lay the next challenge of their training, crossing this turbulent river as one. Shi Feng flexed his fingers, ready for whatever came next. Shi Feng stood on the riverbank, staring across the churning water. The current was fierce, and the river spanned nearly 40 meters at its widest, a formidable barrier for anyone without a boat. He scanned both banks for a shallower ford or a downed tree he could use as a makeshift bridge, but found nothing. Just then, 3 flat-bottomed boats cut through the waves, each manned by 4 oarsmen who pounded the water in perfect unison. They were already halfway across. Judging by their steady pace, these 12 paddlers must have been the first to reach the river, and now they had a clear path to the other side. Without hesitating, Shi Feng raced forward, hoping to claim a spot on one of the boats. Behind him, voices erupted in anger and regret. Dozens of travelers cursed their own hesitance. If only we'd run faster. They stole our chance. Meanwhile, the dozen in the boats who had secured passage turned back to shout triumphant taunts, their cheers echoing across the water. Even from here, Shi Feng could see that the crowd left on shore, well over 100 strong, stood no chance of catching up. But as Shi Feng prepared to leap aboard, something stopped him cold. The 5 heavenly kings, renowned as the most skilled and experienced of this expedition, remained on the riverbank, arms folded, watching the boats pull away. They hadn't scrambled for a spot. They simply observed. Shi Feng's heart rate quickened. If the fastest and the wisest among them weren't crossing, there had to be a reason. He forced himself to slow his breathing and scanned the scene for any hidden danger. The cheerful shouts from midstream now sounded hollow. A silent alarm rang in his mind. Something was very wrong. Chapter 68, The Single Plank Bridge. At the very instant the little ferry drifted into the river's center, the vessel lurched violently. 12 passengers aboard let out blood-curdling screams. In a blinding instant, hundreds of palm-sized slate-gray creatures burst from the water, their toothy maws snapping as they lunged for the terrified travelers. Every spirit ring aboard flared to life. One after another, the cultivators unleashed torrents of spirit energy, firestorms, water blades, shockwaves, tearing dozens of the flying fish from the air. Yet for every each creature felled, 2 more burst forth from the inky depths, blotting out the moonlit sky and even shrouding the distant riverbank in shadow. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack ceased. The gray fish plummeted silent and still back into the river, leaving nothing behind but an enormous spray of blood. The boat, the 12 cultivators, every trace of life, gone. On the shore, villagers stared in stunned horror. What monstrous beasts could have dispatched a dozen trained fighters so swiftly? Many went rigid with fear. Though they had long steeled themselves for danger, nothing had prepared them for this. The very warriors they had counted on to guard the crossing had vanished without a trace. A cold dread settled over the crowd. Hearts pounded so fiercely it felt as though the earth itself might crack beneath them. They had known peril awaited on the river, but when faced with annihilation so absolute, even the bravest found their courage deserting them. Silence reigned. Beyond it loomed only one terrible certainty: the ferry would never again carry them safely across these waters. And if the boat could be swallowed whole, what hope did a simple wooden plank hold? Nevertheless, as helpless fear threatened to overtake them, a single trembling voice rose above the hush: "We must build a bridge, no more ferries." Thus did the villagers resolve, in the shadow of tragedy, to attempt the impossible, to span the river with a single narrow plank, and reclaim safe passage once more. They'd all assumed this training exercise was little more than a controlled skirmish, nothing they couldn't handle. But reality struck them like a bolt of lightning. One moment, a friendly face had been sprinting beside them. The next, there was nothing left but shredded remnants floating in the river. Shi Feng's blood ran cold as Juliana's warning echoed in his mind: never let your guard down. Just hours earlier, more than 100 trainees had swept through these lands without breaking a sweat, cutting down soul beasts like they were nothing. But as soon as they reached this riverbank, complacency set in, and fatal mistakes were made. The instructors must have intended this brutal lesson all along. Only those who stay vigilant in every moment can survive. Yet pay such a price with children barely 10 years old felt ruthlessly heavy. A ripple of unease ran through the group until Xiaoxue spoke, her voice cool and steady. These soul beasts aren't exceptionally powerful, most barely rank in the 10th soul realm, but there are far too many of them clustered here. Instantly, hope sparked among the trainees. "Miss Yue, do you have a plan to get us across?" Even at 10 years old, Xiaoxue carried herself like a high celestial, a dignified presence so commanding that everyone instinctively looked to her in moments of crisis. Now was her moment to lead. Xiaoyue's face remained ice-cold as she surveyed the crowd with a hint of pity. "How you choose to cross the river is your own concern," she said. "It has nothing to do with me." A ripple of indignation spread through the bystanders. "Aren't you going across too?" someone demanded. Xiaoyue ignored them. She turned to the young man standing at her side and said quietly, "Let's go." He gave her a half-smile and bowed his head slightly. "Miss Yue, if you'll pardon me, I'll take my leave now." Page 89. As Shi Feng finished speaking, 2 obsidian wings burst from his back, each easily 2 meters wide when fully unfurled. He seized Zhao Yue's hand, flapped his wings twice, and lifted off in a single graceful arc, then shot straight across the river toward the far bank. Everyone on the shore gaped. A flying soul master in Zhao Yue's team? That was downright unfair. How could anyone hope to compete? "Lin Feng, what do we do now?" someone whispered anxiously. Lin Feng's eyes turned ice-cold. His gaze swept over the assembled challengers, and at once the murmurs died. "Let's move," he said. "No mercy for the top 5. With that, he sprang into the air. A ripple of laughter followed, and then, in an instant, dozens of competitors revealed their own wings. Some were feathered, some leathery, others crystalline. Before anyone could react, they all soared skyward, streaking toward the opposite bank. "Hey, what the hell? I'm your teammate! You can't just take off without me!" a voice shouted. Angry cries broke out among the abandoned allies as they watched their flying partners vanish into the sky, racing ahead on their own. The competition felt utterly unfair. Across the most dangerous stretches of the course, no one could match the speed of those mounted on flying spirits. Frustration and resentment rippled through the crowd, until, without warning, brilliant chains of light shot skyward toward the Soul Masters circling above. Screams ripped through the air moments later. Several riders, thrown off balance by the dazzling traps, lost control and plunged into the churning river below. Strange, eel-like fish surged up from the depths, twisting amid the splashing bodies as blood-tinged waves frothed around them. Horror froze the onlookers into stunned silence. "Gong Yin, what are you doing?" someone shouted. All eyes swung to the young man standing on the riverbank platform. His presence was as cold and unapproachable as a winter dawn. A few spectators opened their mouths to demand justice, but a single, icy glance from Gong Yin shut them down instantly. Shi Feng watched from the sidelines, curiosity flaring into caution. This was Gong Yin, one of the famed 5 heavenly kings. He held a massive ebony bow, its strings still humming with latent energy, while 2-century-old yellow soul rings floated in calm orbits around his shoulders. With detached precision, he had unleashed those chains of light, sending rivals tumbling without so much as a flicker of emotion. Such ruthless composure, Shi Feng thought, stiffening. To cut down opponents so casually marked Gong Yin as a danger far greater than any peril on the course. "I haven't the slightest idea how many people we'll have to lose before we clear this stage," someone muttered. At this point, the only flying Soul Master on their side was on Zhao Yue's team. No other aerial fighters remained. Whether out of respect or fear of Zhao Yue and Lin Feng's strength, Gong Yin hadn't bothered to attack that lone Soul Master. "Good," a spectator nearby whispered, a trace of relief in his tone. "At least Gong Yin picking off rivals makes the contest more even." Moments later, the flying Soul Master, who had escorted Zhao Yue, returned and swooped in to fetch another teammate. "Everyone, we need a plan," he called out. "What else can we do?" someone replied. "We could try heading upstream or downstream to find a safer crossing." As the group debated, a deep groan echoed from the forest behind them. A towering tree crashed down, uprooted in a single thunderous sweep. Peering through the branches, they spotted a handful of teenagers, waving frantically. "Over here! Help us prop this tree across the river as a bridge," one of them shouted. Excitement rippled through the crowd. Without hesitation, they rushed forward to help. The trunk wasn't especially thick, but at over 50 meters long and with remarkably solid wood, it could easily span the river, provided they worked together. By pooling their strength, the team managed to hoist the massive tree trunk over the river, and, to their relief, the peculiar fish below stayed put. Still, the makeshift plank floated less than a meter above the water, and everyone recalled those fish leaping out of the depths. No one volunteered to go first. "I'll do it," a young man said, stepping forward with a gleaming greatsword in hand, the very blade he'd used moments before to fell the trees. He was Wan Tianqi, one of the 5 heavenly kings, renowned for his indomitable martial spirit and lightning speed. All eyes followed him as he climbed onto the plank and dashed across. The strange fish surged upward again, but his pace was so swift they floundered helplessly in midair. In just a few heartbeats, Wan Tianqi reached the far bank and signaled for his teammates. "It works," someone murmured, awe lighting their faces. As long as they moved quickly, they could clear the river without a single fish brushing against them. A clamorous throng converged on the riverbank, jostling one another in a desperate bid to claim the fallen tree trunks as a makeshift bridge. All around, unlucky travelers, too slow on their feet, had their limbs snapped by the thrashing fish beneath the surface, forced to yield to the savage currents. With each passing moment, the logs, already bruised by countless chomp marks, groaned as if on the verge of collapse. Bring down a few more trees, someone shouted. Within minutes, fresh timbers dropped, though not before the lumberjacks lining the shore warned that another round of biting fish could shatter them all. A handful of the slower soulmasters, resigned to caution, shrugged and set off upstream in search of a safer crossing. Meanwhile, Zhao Yueyu's squad and Wan Tianqi's group had wasted no time. They'd already forded the river, melted into the opposite woods, and were out of sight. Shi Feng paused at the edge of the bank, eyes narrowing as he examined the single log that still lay across the roar of the current. It was battered, only as thick as an arm where the fish had bitten, but it had held so far. He could feel his heartbeat accelerate. With his speed and lithe frame, he knew crossing it posed no real challenge. Bracing himself, he took a running start. Splinters flew, water hissed below, and within a heartbeat, Shi Feng was sprinting across the precarious timber, unscathed, triumphant, and already vanishing into the forest on the other side. Chapter 69, Undercover. Most of the crew had already set off to fell trees when Shi Feng abandoned all hesitation and hurried toward the narrow plank bridge spanning the river. A dozen laborers were already halfway across, and he knew he had to catch up. Under the curious and frankly bewildered gazes of the workers, Shi Feng stepped onto the swaying bridge and pushed himself into a full sprint toward the far bank. A few of the onlookers exchanged incredulous murmurs. "Hey, when did that kid catch up with us?" one whispered. "Is he hurt? Why is he running like that?" But Shi Feng paid them no mind. His focus was locked on the other side of the river, where both danger and opportunity lay waiting. Page 90. Unbelievable. His speed is even greater than Wan Tianqi's, and he's one of the 5 heavenly kings. Am I going blind? Seriously, how can a 6-year-old kid move that fast? On the riverbank, onlookers gaped in astonishment. A mere child outstripping a heavenly king, and he hadn't even awakened his martial soul yet. Before anyone could catch their breath, a sharp twang rang out as Gongyin notched another arrow. His eyes, cold and serpentine, locked onto Shi Feng's retreating figure. To Gongyin, any threat, no matter how young, had to be eliminated at its root. But his arrow wasn't aimed at the boy. It flew straight for the thinnest part of a nearby tree, weakened where fish had gnawed at its base. The shaft whistled through the air and struck home with pinpoint precision. Crack! The trunk splintered, and with a roar of rushing water, the broken timber was swept downstream. "My God! He's dead!" someone on the bank shouted. Even the lumbercutters paused their work, rushing forward to see what had happened. Shi Feng's heart pounded. His face went pale, fury rising in his chest. He recognized that arrow at once. It was the signature weapon of one of the 5 heavenly kings. And now he knew that this confrontation was far from over. Shi Feng's pulse thundered in his ears. He had barely outpaced his opponent, and now faced an onslaught of merciless fire. "I'll end you," he vowed silently, legs coiling with power. There were no trees to spring from, no solid ground beneath his feet, yet with each footfall he skimmed over the water's surface, barely disturbing its glassy sheen. Thunderstep, his signature technique, was infinitely adaptable, gliding across grass, bounding over rivers. It all felt effortless. His expression remained as calm and cold as still water, but deep inside, an all-consuming killing intent roared to life for the very first time. On the riverbank, onlookers gaped in disbelief. "He's running, on water, and he's only getting faster." Even Gongyin, watching from the opposite shore, felt a chill. His eyes narrowed to slits as a murderous resolve took hold. Suddenly, the 2 spectral soul rings adorning his arms flared to life, each one crackling with raw power. Without hesitation, he drew twin arrows and sent them hurtling toward Shi Feng, their tips wreathed in eerie light. Shi Feng's heart skipped a beat. He could sense the arrows slicing through the air, each imbued with enough force to pierce armor and bone alike. There was no time to summon another spell, no time for careful calculation, only the split-second chance to dodge. He pushed his legs harder, muscles screaming, and prepared to spring off the water once more. In that instant, he vowed that if he survived this onslaught, Gongyin would regret ever underestimating him. Without a moment's hesitation, Shi Feng surrendered himself to his martial soul. His already striking purple soul ring flared brilliantly, and in an instant, grotesque black armor crawled over his frame. The lone arrow in flight seemed to possess a will of its own. No matter how he shifted, it remained unerringly fixed on his back. Then came 2 more shots in rapid succession. The first arrow slammed through his armor, grinding to a halt against his flesh. Before he could react, the second arrow sped through the gap, hitting the edge of the initial wound. Though its force was weaker, it detonated on impact like a miniature bomb. The explosion propelled Shi Feng forward with terrifying speed. With a single bound, he cleared the watercourse and landed on the opposite bank. He pivoted, ebony eyes crackling with dark energy. 2 razor-sharp fangs slid from his lips as he unleashed a bone-chilling roar. Even across the river, the assembled onlookers felt that surge of malevolence. A cold dread seized their hearts, and one by one they stumbled back, unable to tear their eyes from the fearsome figure before them. Gong Yin froze where she stood, a flicker of fear flashing in her usually icy eyes. Then she steeled herself, her expression growing even colder. Behind her, voices trembled. What kind of monster is he? Why is he so cruel? 1,000-year spirit ring. How could someone so young, only 6 years old, possess one? This has to be the work of a heavenly king, or something even more formidable. Don't dare provoke him. Their panic only sharpened Gong Yin's vicious glare as she swallowed her own fear and fixed her stare on Shi Feng. Moments ago, he had unleashed a roar, a small vent for his fury. Yet beneath that roar lay an ocean of restrained anger. Every hair on his arms seemed to bristle with his martial spirit, which he now held in check, simply surveying them with cold, unblinking eyes. Then, with barely a thought, Shi Feng's power swept outward, uprooting a few trees and sending them crashing into the river. They landed far from his position, but that was enough. The sight of the sweeping force sent the students into full panic. Within heartbeats, all but Gong Yin scrambled across the fallen trunks and fled into the forest, desperate to catch up with their fleeing group. Only Gong Yin remained on the riverbank, her toes skimming the water's edge. She didn't move to follow. Something in Shi Feng's gaze told her he was not to be taken lightly. And for now, at least, she was content to stay where she was. Shi Feng didn't waste another moment. Swearing under his breath that Gong Yin would die and that this forest would be his grave, he stalked away. He would make an example of his enemy, crushing him publicly so that nobody would dare cross him again. Meanwhile, Gong Yin shook off his shock, turned on his heel, and slipped into the trees, moving swiftly upstream along the riverbank. Those who had ventured farther upriver to scout hadn't returned. Perhaps they'd found a crossing point, and Gong Yin intended to join them. Shi Feng had no intention of lying in wait. Now that his Wuhan ability was known, he had lost any shred of restraint. Anyone who dared to strike at him would feel his wrath. Sprinting through tangled undergrowth, he soon came upon a grim sight. 3 shattered corpses of soul beasts, their spectral forms scattered across the forest floor. Beside them lay the bodies of several young girls, their life essences already extinguished. Shi Feng's eyes narrowed. Someone had been here before. Someone ruthless enough to slaughter innocents without hesitation, and he was determined to find out who. Shi Feng felt nothing but resolve. Ever since he decided to come, he'd accepted the risk of death. Power always demands a price. He pressed on until he caught up with the group that had just crossed the river. The moment they saw him, they stiffened and instinctively backed away. Nervous eyes flicked between one another, but in the end, no one dared to strike. Instead, they watched him approach. "I'm at level 19, but facing him, my heart's pounding," one of them muttered. His strength could rival that of the 5 heavenly kings. "Rumor says there'll be 6 of them soon," another piped up. "Don't forget, Gong Yin already provoked this guy. Both of them are meant to die," a third whispered. "I've loathed that scoundrel Gong Yin for ages. If he's going down, better for it to be at this kid's hands," someone else added. "I'm not so sure," came a hesitant voice. Undeterred by their chatter, Shi Feng continued, slipping into the trail the first 2 teams had blazed. High above him, a small black bird wheeled through the sky, shadowing his every step. Chapter 70. The Black Swamp. The forest was far too dense for him to rely on his little black sparrow to scout the quickest route. Even so, Shi Feng's keen perception let him sense the faint life forces of spirit beasts, giving him ample warning to slip away unseen. Today wasn't about battling soul beasts, it was about getting out as fast as possible. After 2 hours of winding through undergrowth, he emerged at the edge of a vast marsh. Opposite him lay another impenetrable stretch of woodland, its boundary at least a few hundred meters away. Shi Feng crouched by the water's edge and extended his senses. Beneath the jet-black mud, dozens of faint life signatures pulsed like ripples in a still pond. He pressed himself motionless against a half-submerged log and waited. The strength of these hidden energies matched the mid-tier spirit beasts he'd skirted in the last forest, creatures roughly 200 years into their cultivation. As his eyes swept the marsh, he spotted a scrap of tattered cloth snagged on a reed. Someone had clearly met their end in this deadly bog. Beyond the clinging silt, the swamp revealed wide stretches of deceptively still, murky water, depths unknown and unmeasured. Shi Feng's gaze snapped to a ripple beneath the surface, a colossal black serpent, as thick as a barrel and easily 10 meters long, gliding silently through the gloom. Beneath this tranquil facade, death lurked at every turn. He swept his eyes across the endless marsh. At his mental command, the little black sparrow launched into the sky. From its altitude, Shi Feng spied a distant gap in the wetland that looked passable. Charging straight ahead would mean wading through a gauntlet of hidden hazards. Veering off to safer ground would triple their travel time. They must have overlooked the flying soul masters. With the power of flight, any master could simply soar above these dangers and leave the rest far behind. Shi Feng clenched his jaw. What now? Zhao Yuyue's team had doubtless flown on already, and Wan Tianqi's group was skirting the swamp's flanks. The real race was only just beginning. Shi Feng hesitated. If he diverted his path even slightly, he'd fall hopelessly behind Zhao Yuyue. He replayed the instructor's challenge in his mind, 3 days to complete the trial. But was that time frame based on the average student's abilities or on those of the 5 great soul masters? If it was the former, then Zhao Yuyue might finish well before the deadline, and he couldn't afford to lag any further. Beneath his feet, the swamp stirred with danger. Within a dozen meters, several soul beasts, each cultivated for over 100 years, lay in ambush. Beyond that, the mists might conceal even more ancient predators. Even a seasoned soul master, if he knew how many formidable beasts lurked here, would think twice before entering. Shi Feng recalled the strange fish in the river earlier, not yet a century old, and realized how much more perilous this terrain was by comparison. Every creature here was a battle-hardened veteran. Should he press on and fight them head-on, or try to slip past undetected? Before he could decide, the distant shouts and snapping twigs told him the rest of the students were closing in. Shi Feng steeled himself. There was no turning back now. Shi Feng ground his teeth. If he wanted to pull ahead of Zhao Yuyue, he couldn't skirt around this swamp. He had to push straight through. Any detour now would only lengthen his path and widen the gap between them. He squared his shoulders, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Suddenly, the underbrush parted, and a troop of young disciples, boys and girls both, emerged, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. They froze when they spotted him, hesitation flickering in their eyes, then cautiously closed the distance. With each new arrival, the swamp seemed to come alive. Ripples crept across the murky surface, betraying the presence of lurking soul beasts drawn by the disturbance. Shi Feng's mind raced. If the creatures focused on the students, he could seize the moment to sprint across the worst of the danger, minimizing the risk to himself. A few of the braver girls crept forward, peering curiously into the sludge at the water's edge. Shi Feng squared his shoulders and lowered his voice until it was a hard whisper. "If you value your lives, step back from the water," he warned, voice as chill as the swamp mist. He leveled his spear at the forest line, ready for whatever might slither out to attack next. Hesitant but obedient, the students fell back. Shi Feng watched the rippling black water, waiting for the soul beasts to reveal themselves, and for the perfect instant to make his run for the other side. Several of the girls recoiled at Shi Feng's words. "Young man, is there some sort of monster down there?" one of them asked, voice trembling. Shi Feng nodded, his expression serious. "That swamp is infested with century-old soul beasts, ancient creatures that won't hesitate to kill anyone who approaches." The girls took another step back, faces pale, staring in horror at the inky black mire. They had already been unnerved by the bizarre fish in the river, But these ancient predators were on an entirely different level. "Then where can we go?" the first girl pressed. Shi Feng gestured toward the narrow embankments flanking the swamp. "You can follow the paths on either side, but they're much longer." A young man from the crowd stepped forward, scowling at Shi Feng. "I don't believe you." As one of the inner disciples standing closest to the Grand Soul Master, he bristled at seeing the area's most beautiful girls seeking guidance from an outsider. Chapter 6. The Fool's Last Laugh. A tense hush settled over the small clearing as the teenagers faced the dark, fetid swamp before them. Legends whispered of century-old soul beasts lurking beneath its churning surface, monsters that had devoured countless would-be adventurers. Yet Shi Feng stood impassive at the tree line, his gaze fixed on the murky water, as if challenging whatever lay within. At last, a tall youth stepped forward, his swagger fueled by bravado. "So you say there are soul beasts down there, and that we can pass safely," he jeered, shooting Shi Feng a mocking glance. "Then why aren't you crossing the swamp yourself?" Shi Feng said nothing. The teenager's confidence swelled. Striding to the very edge of the half-mud, half-water bog, he leaned over, peering into its inky depths. "I don't see any beasts. I think he's bluffing, trying to scare us off so he can go first and clear the path." A few of the younger onlookers exchanged uneasy glances, their suspicion of Shi Feng growing by the second. The boy straightened, a triumphant smirk curling his lips. "If these soul beasts are real, then why haven't they eaten me yet?" He threw back his head and laughed. "Come on, someone prove him wrong. Cross this swamp right now and show us you're not afraid." No sooner had the last taunt left his mouth than the swamp erupted. Towering black shapes burst from the mud like living shadows, each maw a nightmare of serrated teeth. Before anyone could cry warning, one beast lunged, its jaws clamping around the youth's neck. In a single horrifying bite, his head was severed from his body. Crimson arterial spray arced through the air as his lifeless form collapsed back into the muck. Silence fell once more, only this time thick with dread. Shi Feng's dark eyes flicked from the gore-spattered water to the stunned faces of his peers. There would be no more laughter. The soul beasts were real, and they had just claimed their first victim. Shi Feng's heart pounded as massive crocodiles surged from the swamp's edge. The lead beast clamped onto the boy's wounded leg, and with a single brutal tug, tore it free, spraying blood and tissue across the muddy bank. Teenagers who had hurried forward only moments before now collapsed in horror, their screams echoing as they scrambled away like terrified animals. A chorus of shrill cries rose from the girls behind them, their faces contorted in pure panic. Nausea twisted in Shi Feng's gut at the gruesome sight, but he forced himself to calm. The crocodiles, jaws still dripping with crimson, dragged the boy's remains back into the murk and vanished beneath the water. There was no time to mourn. Suddenly, an intense light flared in Shi Feng's eyes. In an instant, his martial soul awakened, his new soul ring glowed brightly, and divine armor materialized around him. His limbs surged with power, every muscle primed for action. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the swamp. "Has he lost his mind?" someone shouted in disbelief, but their words were drowned by the rush of air as Shi Feng blurred into an afterimage. With a single explosive leap, he vaulted over 10 meters, plunging straight into the murky water where the crocodiles had disappeared. Chapter 71. Kill. Shi Feng skimmed across the swamp like a phantom, his toes barely grazing the surface of a lotus leaf with each lightning-fast stride. Though trudging through sticky black mud slowed him compared to firm ground, he still outpaced every pursuer. Along the swamp's edge, dozens of immense crocodiles snapped their jaws and thundered after him. Without warning, Shi Feng veered sharply. 5 meters ahead, a colossal snake, its girth as wide as a bucket and its length easily 20 meters, burst from the murky water. It reared its head, gaping jaws gleaming with venomous intent. Onlookers lining the shore shrank back in terror, their screams muffled by the beast's hissing rage. But Shi Feng remained calm. Years of training had honed his ability to sense living creatures hidden beneath the surface. He anticipated the serpent's strike and danced aside just in time. By the time he reached the swamp's center, 5 more giant snakes had slithered into pursuit, their scales flashing with malicious intelligence. Still, his momentum held firm. In just over 10 seconds, Shi Feng covered more than 100 meters of treacherous mire and burst into the dense forest beyond, the snarling pack of crocs and serpents crawling desperately at his heels. On the bank, mouths agape, the crowd stared after him in stunned disbelief. "What kind of monster is this man?" they whispered. "A human, or something far more deadly?" Shi Feng landed, and without missing a beat, surged forward, his speed enough to shake off the pack of snarling snakes in his wake. When he finally came to a halt, he knelt to examine the ground. The underbrush had clearly been hacked away on purpose. These were fresh cuts, no doubt the work of Zhao Yuyue's team. Evening was already pressing in. Shi Feng followed the footprints winding uphill until the dense forest gave way to a rocky slope. Ahead, a faint glow marked the entrance to a cave. A small fire danced on the stone threshold. He recognized Zhao Yuyue and her companions gathered around it, their figures half illuminated by the flickering flames. Shi Feng glanced back at the dark woods behind him. The summit of this ridge would be safer for an overnight camp. Resolving to press on, he stepped over a boulder and began the climb. A sharp voice sliced through the dusk air. "Who's there?" Shi Feng kept moving, confident in his footing. "Eagle, check it out!" someone barked from the cave. In an instant, a rider spurred a mighty steed down the slope, cutting him off. The horse snorted, pawing the ground, while its rider leered from beneath a patched leather helm. Shi Feng slowed, sizing up this unexpected guard, his path onward suddenly anything but certain. "Ha, so it really is that 6-year-old kid? I didn't expect you to show up," the boy in front of Shi Feng laughed, his eyes alight with the power of the sky spirit at his command. "Tell me, are you the genuine article or just a pretender?" Page 93. "Wait up, I want to see too," one of them called. "Nothing to see here, boss," another laughed. "You go on ahead." But moments later, 4 more figures appeared, cutting Shi Feng off. Along with Zhao Yuyue and Lin Feng, the entire crew now surrounded him. "Hey kid," their leader said, stepping forward with a grin. "Where did you come from?" Shi Feng tried to slip past, but a burly thug blocked his path. "Not till you tell us," he snapped. "The boss inside will get the best cuts," another thug added, eyeing Shi Feng like a prize. "By the time he's done, we might not even get a taste, so why not have some fun with him first?" "Good idea," a third chimed in, leering as he reached out toward Shi Feng's face. "Look at that smooth skin. Could be a real treat." Shi Feng's jaw clenched. He had been on edge ever since the earlier attack, and this was the last straw. A low, feral growl rumbled in his chest. In an instant, his nails blackened into razor-sharp claws and twin fangs slid into place. Before any of them could react, Shi Feng surged forward, slipping through the circle in a heartbeat. He brushed past them, his voice cold as steel. "Don't ever block my way again." Then he was gone, leaving stunned men in his wake. "Shit, something just bit me." "Me too." All 5 men reeled backward as Shi Feng's razor-sharp nails tore into their flesh, injecting a potent neurotoxin that raced through their veins. They crumpled to the ground, bodies convulsing, eyes locked on him in sheer terror. At that moment, they still hadn't grasped just how dangerous this boy was. "Please, spare me," one croaked, trembling as he weakly raised a hand in supplication. Shi Feng's expression remained unreadable. He watched dispassionately as the poison took hold, stripping the life from their bodies with horrifying efficiency. It was his first kill, and to his own surprise, he felt no fear, only an unsettling calm. He'd used a lethal toxin that would end their lives, but wouldn't turn them into mindless undead. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air from the nearby cavern. "Ah!" Shi Feng's heart skipped. He recognized Zhao Yue's panicked cry. Once Zhao Yuyue and Lin Feng discovered these men dead, he knew without doubt they'd accuse him of murder, and there would be no easy way to convince them otherwise. Shi Feng pressed on toward the cave's interior. A lone, sputtering fire at the entrance gave way to a steadily brightening tunnel. But as he stepped into the main chamber, he came to a dead halt. He'd quite literally stumbled into someone's crime scene. In the dim light, Zhao Yuyue lay collapsed on the ground, her clothing torn and tossed aside. Lin Feng stood over her, his fists clenched, and nearby stones and scuffs marked the spot where they must have fought moments before. It was painfully obvious. Zhao Yue had been beaten, then poisoned, and now lay helpless. Shi Feng's jaw went slack. Soul masters on the Douluo continent did mature fast, some even married at 13 or 14, but Lin Feng was only 11. 11. Yet here he was, taking advantage of a wounded girl. The sudden scrape of Shi Feng's boot against stone made both of them whirl around. Relief flared in Zhao Yuyu's eyes, then faded when she recognized who'd arrived. Lin Feng's lips curled into a snarl. "Boy, who let you in here? Eagle, fire wolf, fall back!" Shi Feng's voice echoed through the silent courtyard, but no response came. He smiled coldly. "Don't bother shouting. They're already dead." Lin Feng's face went ashen. Deep down, he was 89% convinced Shi Feng was telling the truth. "Who did it?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Without answering, Shi Feng summoned his spirit power. A brilliant violet ring materialized above his wrist, and a suit of brutal armor wreathed his body in shadow. Even his face was hidden behind a helm of onyx steel, banded with cruel, piercing spikes that glinted under the courtyard's moonlight. Lin Feng staggered back a few steps in shock. Zhao Yuyue, standing beside him, looked as if she might faint. "You let me walk away this afternoon," Shi Feng said, advancing with measured steps. "Thought you were safe? Surprised?" Panicked, Lin Feng unleashed his own spirit power, 2 golden rings swirling above his arm. He hadn't even fastened his tunic before transforming. Leopard spots rippled across his skin, his palms extended into razor claws, and his fingernails sharpened into lethal daggers. They faced each other, armored in spirit energy, predator against predator, in the tense stillness before battle. A tall, slender figure stood before him, every muscle honed and coiled like a spring. "It was you who killed them?" Lin Feng's voice shook with disbelief. 5 of his finest, 1 at level, another at level, and 3 more at level, had fallen silently to this child's hands. The sheer horror of it left him reeling. I admit I treated you poorly earlier. I'm sorry," Lin Feng stammered, his arrogance gone in an instant. He swallowed hard, desperately searching for leverage. "If you spare me, I can send her to you." But the words died on his lips the moment he looked up. The warrior before him was no hardened adult, but a boy, barely 6 years old. Shi Feng met Lin Feng's gaze with icy calm. "Challenge me," he said quietly. "Your end will be death." Shi Feng's frustration snapped. He needed an outlet for his anger. Across the cavern, Lin Feng's smug grin faltered and died. Without a word, Lin Feng's first soul ring flared to life, and he lunged at Shi Feng like a ghost. Lin Feng had mastered the acceleration skill tied to his first ring. With its blessing, no one in the training grounds could match his speed. In a heartbeat, he became a blur of afterimages, closing in from every angle. A chilling whisper cut through the air. "You dared to underestimate me. Now you'll pay, with your life." Boom! Shi Feng slammed against the stone wall, blood splattering from his lips. He staggered back, wiped the crimson away, and then strode forward again, eyes glittering with scorn. "Your fancy speed's useless on me." Lin Feng snarled, and his second soul ring ignited instantly. Jagged, dagger-like claws of light sprouted from his fists as he dove at Shi Feng. The radiance was so searing that Zhao Yuyue, huddled in the corner, squeezed her eyes shut, even as her heart thundered with disbelief. Chapter 72. Thank you for saving me. A savage roar tore from Shi Feng's lips as thick, pitch-black energy erupted around him, swirling like living smoke. At 6 years old, he moved with a ferocity that sent a chill through Lin Feng's heart. Shi Feng's small hands, encased in gleaming black armor, clenched into fists brimming with raw power. Lin Feng lunged, claws outstretched, but Shi Feng met him head-on. The instant their blows collided, metal rang against metal in a shower of sparks. 3 of Lin Feng's razor-sharp talons snapped like twigs under the force, while the remaining 2 struck Shi Feng's armored gauntlets. Even though they bit through the armor's outer layer, they failed to pierce his skin. Lin Feng staggered back, feeling the bones in his forearm threaten to shatter from the impact. Before Lin Feng could even gasp with relief, Shi Feng's fist came crashing in again. Terrifying power radiated from the blow, forcing Lin Feng to raise his other arm in a desperate, futile guard. A deafening crack echoed across the clearing as shin bones splintered into jagged shards, puncturing flesh in a gruesome spray of crimson. Lin Feng collapsed to his knees, agony flashing in his terrified eyes. Only then did the dark aura around Shi Feng fade, his heavy breathing the only sound in the stunned silence. He stood over his fallen opponent, eyes wide with the innocence of a child, even as they glinted with a resolve far beyond his years. Shi Feng came to a halt, finally releasing the anger that had been coiling in his chest. Before him, 11-year-old Lin Feng lay sprawled on the ground, both arms shattered, blood steadily flowing from his wounds. He trembled violently as he wailed, tears mingling with the grime on his cheeks. Despite his unusually mature mindset, the pain was more than he could bear. "You're a demon," Lin Feng sobbed, voice cracking. "Not even human." Shi Feng's helmet slid free, the torchlight glinting off his dark hair and the sharp lines of his face. He spoke quietly, each word measured. "If you want someone to blame, blame your own men for picking a fight they couldn't handle." With a final, frantic effort, Lin Feng scraped his fingernails across Shi Feng's throat. Shi Feng barely flinched. He straightened, stepping away and turning his attention to Xiaoxue. She lay on the stone floor, her robes torn in the scuffle. Though her figure wasn't quite as statuesque as her sister Huliena's, Xiaoxue's form was still remarkably graceful. In the wavering torchlight, her pale skin seemed almost luminescent, like white jade touched by firelight. For the first time, Shi Feng truly looked at her, and his heart skipped a beat. Noticing his steady gaze, Xiaoxue's cheeks tinted pink with embarrassment. She sat up, pressing hands to her ruined tunic. "Brother," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper, "could you please help me find some clothes?" Shi Feng's brow tightened as he took in Xiaoxue's sudden change in demeanor. The haughty, indifferent girl he'd brushed off earlier was nowhere to be seen. Now her posture was timid, her voice soft and coaxing, and her cheeks faintly flushed. "My sister is weak," she whispered, averting her eyes. He crossed his arms. "Earlier tonight I asked to join your team. You treated me like I didn't matter. Why should I help you now?" Yue bit her lip. "You don't understand. In this cruel concentration camp, I have to pretend to be strong, otherwise I won't survive. But deep down, I'm just a fragile woman. If you'll stand by me now, I promise my sister will obey you in the future." At that, she attempted to push herself upright, but immediately crumpled in pain, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. Shi Feng stepped forward and scooped up the discarded cloak at their feet, throwing it around her shoulders. The fabric shifted, revealing too much of her slender form. She ducked her head, voice barely audible. "Sir, could you cover me properly?" Shi Feng knelt down, carefully adjusting the cloak so it draped modestly around her. His fingers smoothed the fabric until it lay snugly against her neck and shoulders. Yue's shoulders relaxed, and she pressed her palms together, eyes brimmed with gratitude. Standing, he offered her a measured nod. "I'll help you. On one condition, you and your sister will follow my lead from now on." Yue's eyes lit up with relief and hope. "Thank you, Shi Feng. You won't regret this." In the dim light of the barracks, a fragile alliance formed, one that might just save them both. Shi Feng intended to unravel what it was about Xiaoxue that had drawn him in, and only then decide how to deal with her. Before he could take another step, a sudden flash of steel. Xiaoxue had produced a slender dagger, the blade whistling as it sliced through his tunic and drove deep against his side. Where had this delicate girl acquired such strength? She sat up in a blur of motion, gripping Shi Feng's shoulders and leaning close enough that her lips brushed his ear. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for saving me." Her voice was soft, almost reverent. Still panting, she lifted the dagger again, over and over, only to find the blade wouldn't budge. Confusion flickered across her face. She wrenched the dagger free and struck again with all her might. Clang! The blade rang hollowly against something far harder than flesh. Zhao Yoyue's eyes widened as she realized Shi Feng's had gone completely black. Two slender fangs had slid into place, shimmering in the dim light and sending a chill racing through her veins. "I was only teasing you," Shi Feng murmured, a crooked smile curling at the corners of his mouth. She managed a trembling laugh and backed away instinctively. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. How could her dagger fail to pierce him? And how had this supposedly fragile girl mustered such power? Rumors had whispered that Shi Feng alone had slain Lin Feng, and now she understood exactly why everyone feared him. Shi Feng let out a low, menacing growl. Before Xiaoxue could even pull herself upright, he shoved her to the ground and bared his fangs in a fierce snarl. The sight of his open maw sent a jolt of fear through her. Page 95. No. Zhao Yue's scream rang out in the silent corridor. Before she could react, a searing agony tore through her neck. She gasped, lifting a trembling hand to find Shi Feng's small fingers wrapped around her throat, his lips pressed against her skin. In an instant, her blood, her very life essence, surged upward in a crimson flood into his waiting mouth. Horror froze her in place. This child, he was drinking her blood. She tried to summon her soul power to wrench herself free, but her limbs refused to obey. A potent toxin coiled through her veins, paralyzing her body. All she could do was stand, utterly powerless, as her life force drained away. A bone-deep cold crept beneath her skin, even as her mind sharpened with sheer terror. Every gasp of breath felt like a struggle for survival. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears. "What have I done wrong?" she choked out, tears mingling with rivulets of blood on her cheeks. "I only did what my father taught me, slayed a 6-year-old child. How can that be wrong?" Despair and confusion swirled in her heart as she watched her strength ebb. Finally, Shi Feng released her. She staggered back, collapsing to her knees, the world spinning in hues of red and black. Above her, the boy stood motionless, blood still dripping from his lips. He licked them with a faint, nostalgic smile. The taste of her blood, he thought, was exquisite, smoother and far sweeter than any wine, richer than any life essence he had ever known. In that quiet, blood-stained smile lay something far more terrifying than the act itself. Shi Feng stared down at Zhao Yue, who lay on the cold ground, her eyes glazed in shock. If she hadn't offered some advantage, he would have drained every last drop of her life force without a second thought. But in this brutal camp, allies were rare and valuable. If nothing unexpected occurred, she would become his second subordinate. Of course, that was only if she proved worth keeping. Otherwise, he'd let her fade into insignificance. He lifted his tunic and pressed a hand to his side. The blade of her first strike had barely grazed his skin, failing to penetrate deeper. After he revealed his undead nature, her dagger had been utterly useless. Already the shallow wound had sealed itself, leaving no scar. Drawing fragments of her memories into his own, Shi Feng formed a hypothesis. The source of his mysterious pull must lie in her family's martial soul, a lunar power of some kind. But conjecture was no substitute for proof. He'd need to test it firsthand. A slow, confident smile spread across his lips. Shi Feng felt the final strands of the soul bond formation snap into place, sealing a stronger link between him and Zhao Yue. A moment later, she rose and knelt before him, head bowed in reverence and fear. "Master Shi Feng, please forgive my transgressions," she whispered. He turned away to pick up her discarded robes and toss them over his shoulder. "Put these on," he said. Zhao Yue's cheeks flushed as she hurried to dress herself. Shi Feng, feigning sternness, even as a faint color warmed his own brow, felt a surge of relief. He reminded himself that, after all, he was still just a boy. Otherwise, this moment might have been far more embarrassing. Once she'd straightened her robes, Zhao Yue looked back at him, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "Master," she said softly. He met her gaze evenly. "From now on, you may accompany me." "I will follow you always, master," she promised, her voice steady with devotion. Hearing himself addressed in that way by such a beautiful girl, Shi Feng felt an unexpected flutter of unease, and perhaps something more. "From now on, in front of others, you may call me Xiaochen." "Understood, master." Shi Feng cast a glance at Lin Feng. The young man lay unmoving, his life snuffed out. Without a word, Shi Feng turned and strode out of the cavern, Zhao Yue hurrying to keep pace. Once outside, she stopped dead in her tracks. 5 bodies lay scattered across the rocky slope, each one identical, their skin a deathly slate-gray mottled with dark veins. Even the most voracious soul beasts would hesitate to touch corpses in such a monstrous state. Shi Feng felt no urge to comment. He began his ascent toward the mountain's peak, his steps steady and silent. After a few heartbeats, Zhao Yue summoned the courage to speak. "Master, it's growing late. Should we continue on? As it stands, we're still the fastest team." She ventured a cautious look at his profile, trying to gauge his mood. Bound to him by soul and loyalty, she obeyed without question, but she still struggled to read Shi Feng's temperament. In the depths of that cavern, she had witnessed his unflinching resolve. Now all she knew for certain was that her master's strength and talent lay far beyond her own, and that she must follow wherever he led. Shi Feng shook his head. No, we'll spend the night on the summit. Zhao Yue's eyes widened. A cave at the mountain's base would be far more secure, so why choose the exposed peak? She opened her mouth to question him, but Shi Feng merely strode on, his thoughts already running through what he knew of her. The Zhao family was one of the foremost clans under the Wuhun Palace, and Zhao Yue was its treasured prodigy. At just 11 years old, she had already broken through to the 24th level Soul Master rank, a feat unmatched by any other in her generation. Unsurprisingly, such talent had bred a haughty confidence. She looked down on anyone she deemed less gifted. Yet beneath her pride lay a dangerous inexperience. She'd failed to recognize that the 5 would-be kidnappers they just dispatched were men loyal to Lin Feng, and she'd nearly been overwhelmed. Only when Shi Feng paused at the ridge's crest did he bother to look back. The full moon bathed the jagged peaks in silver light, and a cold wind whipped across the stones. Zhao Yue, her cheeks tinged pink by the chill and by embarrassment, bowed deeply. "Master, thank you for saving me," she murmured. Shi Feng nodded once, his expression unreadable. Then he turned toward the western sky, already plotting their next move under the silent watch of the mountains. Shi Feng looked up at her, a half-smile playing on his lips but never quite reaching his eyes. "You thanked me with a dagger," he said softly. Panic flashed across Zhao Yue's face. Without a second thought, she dropped to her knees. "Master, please punish me," she begged. Shi Feng's voice was calm as he gestured toward Zhao Yue. "Get up. If I'd wanted to punish you, I'd have done it already." Zhao Yue bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, Master. Release your martial soul and show me what you've mastered." Shi Feng studied her closely. Zhao Yue drew in a steady breath, centering her thoughts, and with a sudden sweep of energy, summoned her spirit. A silvery orb resembling a full moon materialized above her crown, casting cool, soft light over everything nearby. The glow gave her an otherworldly grace, and 2 pale yellow rings of power drifted into place around her slender form. As the luminous moonlight spread across the training ground, Shi Feng felt a peculiar resonance deep in his chest, an odd pull that grew stronger the longer it lingered. "Master," Zhao Yue began, her voice steady, "my first soul skill is called Moonlight Like Water. It's a control ability. Anyone under the moon's glow has their movement speed reduced by 20%. My second skill is Moonlight Slash, a powerful offensive strike." Shi Feng inclined his head. "Demonstrate the first skill." Zhao Yue nodded firmly. The innermost of her 2 soul rings pulsed to life, and the moonlight around her shimmered with renewed intensity, as if it were a living, clinging mist. But as the radiance spread, Shi Feng kept his footing perfectly. His speed and reflexes remained unchanged, despite her claim of a 20% slowdown. He raised an eyebrow, curiosity tempered by a hint of skepticism, and prepared to test her control even further. Shi Feng closed his eyes and concentrated. To his surprise, he felt his movement speed surge by a full 20%, and all because of Zhao Yue's skill. When he shared this discovery with her, Zhao Yue frowned in confusion. She had never seen her ability produce such an effect. "I don't understand it," she admitted, shaking her head. "Logically, it shouldn't do anything to you." "It still works," Shi Feng murmured to himself. He remembered how, only moments ago, he'd resolved that Zhao Yue was more of a liability than an asset, and that it might be better to eliminate her. But this new development threw him off balance. It wasn't the skill itself that felt strange. Was there something else at work? He let the thought drift through his mind, and in an instant, the dormant residue of the zombie's martial spirit within him flared to life. The odd sensation intensified, and suddenly he realized what was happening. Zhao Yue's martial spirit was being irresistibly drawn toward him. Zhao Yue froze. Her wide eyes locked onto Shi Feng's, and she gasped, "Master, there's this strange feeling inside me. I can't explain it, but..." She stopped and stared at him, her cheeks flaming. I really want to be close to you." Though Shi Feng was still a child in years, he was a man, and more importantly, her master. Yet as he watched Zhao Yue blush so vividly, he couldn't deny the unsettling pull that now bound their martial spirits together. Shi Feng's heart skipped a beat at Zhao Yue's words. She too had felt that inexplicable tug when their martial souls awakened in perfect harmony. He found himself wanting nothing more than to be near her. "Then come closer," he murmured. She gave a slight nod and stepped forward. Almost at once, a strange aura crackled between them. Zhao Yue's form blurred, her body growing faintly translucent as if she were dissolving into mist. Sensing the shift, Shi Feng spread his arms wide. From his core, a turbulent black energy burst forth, radiating in a rolling wave several meters around him. In the next instant, her speed doubled. She lunged at him like a bolt of lightning and melted seamlessly into his embrace. "Ah!" Shi Feng couldn't help but utter a surprised grunt as her essence fused with his. Then, with a sound that echoed like thunder, he threw back his head and roared. Dark energy surged through him, propelling his body upward so forcefully that his clothes ripped apart. The inky aura swirled around him, churning outward until it formed a 10-meter sphere of swirling shadow. Inside that roiling black fog, nothing could be seen, and yet, somehow, everything felt more alive than ever. Shi Feng stood at the center of the swirling black mist, his form locked in mid-change. In seconds, he solidified at a precise height of 1.7 meters. The seams of his clothing tore open as sinewy muscles rippled into view. His fingernails had elongated into curved, dagger-sharp talons. His features, still handsome, were subtly altered, hints of a more powerful visage shimmering beneath. Within his mind, Zhao Yue's consciousness had merged with his own, manifesting as a current of energy flowing through him. They exchanged thoughts seamlessly, yet Shi Feng held full command of his body and skills. In that instant, they both understood. This was the martial soul fusion skill. All around him, the mist was as thick as ink, so dense that no one could see their own hands. Enemies stumbling through it were effectively blind. But Shi Feng's vision cut through the gloom. Every one of his senses had been sharpened, every ability heightened. Beneath the surface of that dark cloud lay an undercurrent of pure resentment. It twisted the minds of those caught inside, sowing confusion and inflaming their murderous impulses. Comrades turned on comrades, lost to the madness. Shi Feng, anchored by Zhao Yue's steady presence, remained clear-headed and prepared for whatever horrors the mist would unleash next. Chapter 74. The Final Level. Shi Feng severed the fusion, and the black mist that had enveloped their enemy wavered and dissolved. The foe's resistance to poison had been slashed by 50%, and the victim's blood had boiled so fiercely that those with weaker cultivation actually saw their life force drawn from their bodies and absorbed into Shi Feng's own energy reserves. Nodding to himself, Shi Feng closed his eyes briefly. Martial soul fusion was indeed a potent technique, but its true power would only become clear in the heat of battle. He couldn't wait to push it further. At that moment, Zhao Yue slipped out of the fusion field, her cheeks still flushed from the intensity of the bond. She had felt Shi Feng's surging power as one, and she marveled at how rare such a martial soul fusion skill truly was. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined meeting someone whose spirit could meld so perfectly with her own. Now, finally, Shi Feng smiled in genuine satisfaction. He had found a partner worthy of his abilities, and a path to even greater strength. "Master," Zhao Yue said softly, her curiosity winning out, "what is your cultivation level now?" "Still level," Shi Feng replied. He had broken through to this stage after his last tribulation barely a month ago. But after drawing in nearly all of Zhao Yue's vitality, he could sense a fresh surge of strength rippling through him, an unmistakable sign that another breakthrough was drawing near. Zhao Yue's cherry-red lips parted in astonishment. "Master, you really are incredible." Shi Feng simply waved a hand. "It's nothing. Find a clean spot and sit down. Night is the best time for cultivation." She bowed and settled cross-legged a respectful distance away, still a little intimidated by his calm confidence. Shi Feng ignored her, closed his eyes, and mentally tasked the little black sparrow perched on his shoulder with keeping watch over their surroundings. With that, he slipped into meditation. Zhao Yue watched his serene face for a moment, then drew in a steady breath, closed her eyes, and began her own practice. They remained like that through the night. It wasn't until dawn's first light filtered through the trees that they both stirred and opened their eyes. Shi Feng halted on a jagged ridge and turned to Zhao Yue, whose cheeks still glowed with excitement. "Master, I cultivated all through the night," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. Before, I would collapse after 3 or 4 hours, but last night I felt no fatigue at all. A faint smile curved Shi Feng's lips. That's the moonlight chi I bestowed on you. It wards off exhaustion under the moon's glow. Overcome with gratitude, Zhao Yue sank to one knee. She had always worshipped true power, and Shi Feng had just unlocked hers. Thank you, Master, she whispered. Enough, he commanded gently, waving her up. We haven't a moment to lose if first place is to be ours. He glanced back. Surely their rivals would be hot on their heels by now. Zhao Yue sprang to her feet and fell in beside him. They pressed on, scaling the steep mountain slopes. Every time she thought the path too sheer, Shi Feng would dart across crumbling ledges or spring up a rocky incline as if he were walking on level ground. Bewildered, she struggled to keep pace, marveling at how effortlessly he conquered the perilous terrain. Shi Feng's unconventional tactics had Zhao Yue alternately baffled and amazed. After hours of trekking through the rugged passes, she could no longer contain her curiosity. Master, she ventured, pausing to catch her breath, why do you keep changing our course? Because there are soul beasts nearby, Shi Feng answered simply. Soul beasts? Zhao Yue echoed, frowning. But we haven't encountered any. Shi Feng offered no further explanation. Instead, he led the way more deliberately, his senses alert. Zhao Yue trailed close behind, every nerve on edge. Then a sudden shiver ran down her spine. Master, she whispered, voice tight with excitement and fear, I'm picking up an incredibly strong life energy signature. Is that one of the soul beasts? Shi Feng nodded. Yes, ever since I bit you, the corpse poison I carry transferred some of my abilities to you. One of those is detecting the life energies of nearby creatures. As a zombie, you'll gain other powers in time. Zhao Yue's eyes lit up with gratitude and wonder. Thank you, Master. You continue to surprise me. Shi Feng merely smiled. All right, let's skirt around its territory and press on. By midday, the two finally broke free of the endless mountain passes and stepped into a bright clearing beyond. The sun shone high overhead, and for a moment neither spoke, both lost in thoughts of the trials still to come. Shi Feng led the way at a relentless pace for over 4 hours, and by the time they finally paused, Zhao Yue could barely put one foot in front of the other. Every step had been an ordeal. Shi Feng seemed almost casual about picking the safest and most direct routes through treacherous terrain, while she had to pick her way carefully to keep up. At last, he noticed how drained she looked and motioned for her to stop. They stepped into the cool shade of a large tree and sank onto the dusty ground. Zhao Yue's shirt clung to her back with sweat. She fumbled for her water pouch and drained it in a few desperate gulps. The cold water revived her, but as she wiped her mouth, she suddenly remembered courtesy. Master, I'm so sorry. I was so thirsty. I should have offered you first. With that, she thrust the nearly empty pouch toward Shi Feng. He shook his head with a small smile. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Relieved, she slipped the pouch back into her pack and pulled out a handful of hardened rations she'd stashed for emergencies. Shi Feng declined again with a shake of his head, so she tucked the pouch away and bit into a piece herself. Almost immediately, a wave of nausea hit her, and she scrambled to her feet, clutching her stomach and turning away from him. She barely made it before emptying her stomach onto the earth. Wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, she glared at the dry, tasteless bundle in her hand. Ugh, this stuff's horrible. Has it gone bad? Nothing's wrong with the food itself, Shi Fei, Nong explained. It's just that once you become a zombie, you can't digest normal meals anymore. Zhao Yue's eyes widened. She looked genuinely distressed. Then what am I supposed to eat? Master, I'm so hungry. Come with me. I'll show you, Shi Feng said, standing up. He still felt sated from drinking her blood last night, but Zhao Yue needed to adapt to her new undead reality as quickly as possible. Eager yet anxious, she followed him out. A few minutes later, Shi Feng returned carrying a small animal, a fox cub, in his hands. He set it down gently in front of her. Zhao Yue stared at it in horror. Master, I don't know how to roast this. Shi Feng shook his head. You're not going to roast it. Drink its blood. Zhao Yue froze. Master wanted her to. A shiver ran down her spine as she recalled the moment he drank her blood last night. Now she understood. A zombie's nourishment came only from blood. Shi Feng barely registered her gasp. In one swift motion, a dagger appeared in his hand, and he slit the little tiger's throat. Blood erupted in a bright, gushing arc. Zhao Yue's eyes widened as she swallowed hard, some primal hunger stirring in her veins. Before she could think, her body took over. 2 ivory fangs slid free from her lower lip, lending an unexpectedly feral grace to her usually cool features. "Retract your fangs and drink," Shi Feng ordered, his voice low and steady. Her mind screamed in protest, but her legs carried her forward. She pressed her lips to the spouting wound and drank deeply, the metallic warmth flooding her senses. Minutes passed before the cub fell still, its tiny body a dry shell. Without hesitation, Shi Feng cast the remains aside. Zhao Yue stumbled back, trembling, a series of startled hiccups breaking the stunned silence. Dark droplets flecked her cheeks and chin, highlighting the dazed wonder in her eyes. He stepped closer and asked quietly, "Are you sated?" She blinked, then nodded. "All right, move on once you're done eating," Shi Feng called as he picked up his pace. The little black sparrow he'd sent ahead to scout the path had already returned, a sure sign they were nearing the exit. He turned around and issued a warning. "From now on, you're not to bite anyone. No humans, no spirit beasts, without my express permission. Understood?" Only Shi Feng could control the zombies he'd turned. Zhao Yuye had no such ability. If the undead ran free, the consequences would devastate rival forces and even shake the foundations of the spirit hall. Chapter 75. Master, I want Shi Feng's plan was simple. If there were zombies here, he'd be the one pulling their strings. He and Zhao Yue pressed on until they reached the final level, and before them lay a yawning canyon, its sheer walls rising thousands of meters into the air. Peering through the little black sparrow's vision, Shi Feng spotted an exit just beyond the gorge. Yet something strange hovered at its heart, a haze of pink mist that stretched for hundreds of meters. "Let's go. If we hurry, we'll be the first ones there," Shi Feng said, stepping into the shadow of the cliffs. Zhao Yue fell into step behind him, her eyes never leaving his back. The canyon was eerily empty. Should any spirit beasts appear, evasion wouldn't be an option. They'd have to fight their way through. As they advanced, Zhao Yue's moon martial soul materialized behind her, transforming her silhouette into that of a living zombie. The sensation was utterly foreign and thrilling to her. Together, they ventured deeper into the canyon, each ready for whatever lay hidden in that mysterious pink mist. Ever since her transformation, Zhao Yue's speed, defense, and vitality had all surged to unprecedented levels. Shi Feng had also warned her that a potent, overbearing corpse poison now ran through her veins. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected to awaken so many new abilities overnight. True, she'd had to renounce some of her old human habits, but in return, she'd earned a small fortune and become immeasurably powerful. Gratitude toward her master, Shi Feng, filled her heart. They pressed deeper into the Grand Canyon's winding chasm without encountering a single soul beast. Then, just as they reached the canyon's midpoint, a strange pink mist drifted into view, coiling like silent smoke between the rocks. "Stay close," Shi Feng said, his tone grave. His enhanced vision pierced the darkness, but the swirling mist obscured everything within. And yet, his senses detected no soul beasts lurking in its depths. Zhao Yue offered a quick nod. Out of the folds of his cloak, Shi Feng produced a length of sturdy rope and looped it around their waists, leaving 3 meters of slack between them. "We go together," he instructed. "And you'd better tell me exactly what's going on." Swallowing her curiosity, Zhao Yue returned his nod. Side by side, they stepped into the pink mist, each footfall echoing against the canyon walls as the swirling haze closed around them. Shi Feng stepped into the chamber and immediately caught the faintest hint of perfume on the air. It was so subtle, yet so intoxicating that he couldn't resist taking a few deep breaths. Behind him, Zhao Yue did the same, her eyes widening in surprise. "Master, it smells incredible in here," she whispered. "Stay close," Shi Feng warned, keeping his voice low. A thick, rose-tinted mist curled through the room, and beyond a few paces, it obscured everything. Unless he and Zhao Yue walked side by side, they might as well have been alone. As they pressed forward 20 meters, Shi Feng felt a strange pull at the edges of his mind, a sudden, urgent desire that blazed so fiercely he almost staggered. The mist, He realized with alarm it was affecting him. A dizziness swept over him. He caught a soft moan from Zhao Yoyue behind him, as though she, too, was succumbing. His heart pounded, and reality fractured. When his vision cleared, Shi Feng was no longer in the misty passage. He sat instead on an ornate throne in a vast, candlelit hall, Wuhun Hall, as he recognized from the statues of ancient soul practitioners lining the walls. He was clad in the same dark robes he'd worn last night during his Wuhun fusion practice, his aura resonating with power. Before him, two young women materialized, lithe, beautiful, each standing on either side of the throne. Their voices, sweet and breathless, rang out in unison. "Brother Feng." They bowed, eyes shining with adoration. Shi Feng's mind reeled. How had inhaling a few whiffs of that red fog transported him here, into what felt like a dream, and yet felt all too real? And who were these two who greeted him as if he were their lord? A flicker of instinct told him to test the illusion. He rose from the throne, muscles coiling with martial readiness. As he did, the girls' gazes followed him eagerly, their expressions a mix of reverence and longing. Shi Feng straightened his shoulders. He'd faced stranger illusions before, but none so beguiling. Staying calm, he silently vowed to unmask the mystery of this perfumed haze and escape before its seductive power claimed him entirely. Shi Feng's eyes snapped open, his heart racing. Moments ago he'd been lost in a vivid hallucination. Qian Renshui and Hu Lina before him, both dressed in scant, provocative attire. Qian Renshui's ethereal white wings had fluttered softly behind her, and a thick, bushy tail had swayed in hypnotic rhythm. Their faces, impossibly beautiful, had tilted upward as they crept toward him, their movements slow, deliberate, and hauntingly sensual. He didn't know how long he'd been under that spell, but his entire body trembled as reality rushed back. Luckily, Hu Lina had once tempered his will, giving him just enough inner strength to wrench himself free at the last moment. Desperately, he reached behind himself for the rope tied around his waist. Relief flooded him when his fingers found it, and he realized Zhao Yue was still secured by his side. But that relief vanished the instant he turned back to her. Zhao Yue lay on the ground, her eyes fluttering and lips murmuring his name in a distant, echoing voice. "Yue, wake up!" he pleaded, shaking her gently, but she drifted on in the same trance-like state, with nowhere else to turn, and cheeks burning with embarrassment. Shi Feng draped his cloak over her and gathered her into his arms, shielding her modesty as he prayed for her to return from that dream world. Shi Feng knew there was only one way to shatter the illusion trapping Zhao Yue. He had to charge straight out of this ghostly realm. Cradling her in his arms, her weight almost negligible, he vaulted forward through the swirling crimson mist. To his surprise and mild embarrassment, Zhao Yue's arms fluttered about wildly, her body twisting as if guided by some mischievous spirit. "Master, master," she murmured, her voice laced with both yearning and confusion. "Master, I want it." He cast her a baffled glance. They'd only met the night before, plus half a day, and already she was behaving in the most flirtatious, reckless way. He shook his head but kept running, weaving through the dense fog until finally the choking red haze fell away. Without hesitation, Shi Feng deposited Zhao Yue unceremoniously on the solid ground beyond the mist's edge. "Ouch!" she cried, landing hard on her backside. Her eyes fluttered open, clear and alert now that the spell had broken. "Master, how did I end up on the ground?" Her gaze swam with confusion at first, then sharpened as she recalled the hazy visions and phantom whispers of the illusion. Her cheeks paled, and she let out a shaky breath. "It was all an illusion," she whispered, finally understanding the danger they'd just escaped. Shi Feng led the way, his steps quickening as they neared the canyon's mouth. Behind him, Zhao Yue's cheeks flamed a deep crimson, hotter than any forge. She dared not meet his gaze. I was just daydreaming about being with Master," she stammered, her voice trembling. The more she thought about it, the more mortified she became. Surely Shi Feng had noticed her flush and awkward pause. She wanted nothing more than to vanish. Sensing her embarrassment, Shi Feng cleared his throat. "Let's stay focused," he said briskly. "There should be an exit up ahead. We'll finish the mission first, then." "Right," Yue whispered, her reply barely above a breath. She followed him for only a few paces before coming to an abrupt stop. Frowning, she glanced down at her trousers. "What's wrong?" Shi Feng asked, turning back to her. Yue pointed at her pant legs. The fabric was damp across a wide swath. I don't understand, she muttered. There's no water around here. Shi Feng scanned the dry, rocky walls of the canyon. Weird, he murmured. Then, noticing how uncomfortable Yue looked, he opened his pack and pulled out a compact single-person tent. With a quick motion, he threw it over her shoulders like a makeshift cloak. Here, he said gently. It'll shield you while we figure this out. Yue ducked under the fabric, grateful for the cover. Shi Feng stood by, ready to help her change into dry clothes, and to finally discover just where that unexpected moisture had come from. Quick, change your clothes, or someone else will catch up to us. Zhao Yue's cheeks burned red, but she didn't argue. She darted into the tent and re-emerged in a fresh set of gear almost instantly. Let's go, Shi Feng said tersely, cutting her no slack. He strode toward the massive gate a few hundred meters away. Zhao Yue hurried after him, barely keeping pace. She kept sneaking sideways glances at him, her eyes flickering with nerves and something like excitement. Through that veil of pink mist lay the final level. Once they passed it, no more obstacles would stand in their way. A minute later, they stood before the gate, a towering iron barrier secured by thick chains, flanked by patrols of soul masters. Slouched on a folding chair just outside, an elderly man with white hair and narrowed eyes seemed almost asleep. "Grandpa, open the gate!" Shi Feng called out. The old man stirred, peering around suspiciously. When he recognized Shi Feng and Zhao Yue on the other side, he sat up straight, brow arched. "You two already beat the level? That fast?" Chapter 76, Kill! Impossible! The old man muttered under his breath, pushing himself to his feet and yanking the door open. "You actually passed through that fog?" Shi Feng met the old man's incredulous glare. Beady eyes set close together, two wispy whiskers sprouting from his upper lip. He looked more like a mouse than a man, and an oily grin creased his face. "Yes," Shi Feng said evenly. The old man's gaze flicked over to Zhao Yue. Her cheeks were still pink from exertion, and a lecherous smile curled his lips. "Little girl," he crooned, voice thick with perversion, "doesn't it feel wonderful?" Zhao Yue's eyes snapped open in fury. "How dare you!" she spat, her glare sharp enough to cut steel. He paid her no mind. Turning back to Shi Feng, the old man scoffed. "You said the fog should have lasted much longer. It looks like it cleared so quickly because of this clueless brat right here." Shi Feng leaned back and sighed. "Well, if I don't know anything, there's nothing for me to mess up, is there?" The old caretaker, lost in his own thoughts, simply chuckled. Shi Feng glanced at him curiously. "Hey, are we the first ones out?" The old man's laughter died in his throat as he whipped around and bellowed, "Instructor Longshan, your student has emerged." His voice rolled across the field like thunder. A few hundred meters away, the flaps of giant tents snapped open, and a handful of figures burst forth. Shi Feng recognized Chief Instructor Longshan at the lead, flanked by several deputy instructors. The old caretaker gave a satisfied nod, then shuffled back inside as if his job here was done. In a heartbeat, the instructors closed the distance and surrounded Shi Feng and Zhao Yue. Instructor Qingqing's eyes went wide. "It's you!" she exclaimed. Shi Feng inclined his head with a polite smile. Chief Instructor Longshan, ever stern, studied him and then looked to Zhao Yue. "So you brought him out?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Zhao Yue shook her head. "No, sir," she replied. "Shi Feng led me out. He finished first. I was right behind him in second place." Longshan's skeptical gaze lingered on them both, unwilling to accept so simple an explanation. But the timing spoke for itself. Shi Feng had truly been the first to emerge from the tents. Qingqing leaned in from the sidelines and murmured, "Don't underestimate it. The old man's rose-hued memory isn't something you conquer easily." Her words made it clear to everyone. Zhao Yue's success in the final trial of desire owed entirely to Shi Feng. Longshan nodded in agreement. The rules permitted teamwork. Zhao Yue had guided Shi Feng throughout, and there was nothing irregular about it. His only earlier hesitation stemmed from Shi Feng's special status, since an official report would have to be filed with the sect leader afterward. Now, however, any doubts were laid to rest. Shi Feng takes first place, Zhao Yue second. Longshan announced, then turned away. An assistant instructor promptly recorded the rankings in his notebook. A curious hush fell over the group, until Shi Feng spoke up, surprising everyone. Instructor Long, may I enter the trial chamber again? Again? Longshan frowned. You've already secured first place. Why would you want to go back in? He and the other onlookers exchanged puzzled glances, eager to hear Shi Feng's answer. Shi Feng didn't bother to soften his words. His voice turned icy as he said, "Because I intend to kill someone." A hush fell over the onlookers. Kill someone. Children bickered all the time. Why would a 6-year-old suddenly announce a murder plot? Unless Shi Feng was unbelievably gifted, so much so that he'd provoked others' envy. After all, he had been the first to step forward during the selection ceremony. Perhaps his peers feared him. Longshan's brow furrowed. Who do you want to kill? Gong Yin, Shi Feng replied without hesitation. A shocked cry burst from Qing. Shi Feng, are you out of your mind? Her eyes brimmed with panic. She'd been counting on building a future alongside him, not watching him walk into a dangerous vendetta. At the edge of the crowd, Zhao Yoyue simply raised an elegant brow. She seemed vaguely surprised, but far from worried. If Shi Feng could have bested Lin Feng, what hope did Gong Yin stand against him? Silence pressed in as everyone processed his declaration. Shi Feng's expression remained unreadable, but the message was clear. He would settle his score, no matter the cost. Shi Feng said nothing at first, merely fixed Master Longshan with a steady gaze. After a long moment, he finally nodded. All right. A stunned hush fell over the instructors. None of them expected him to agree. Qing sprang forward, her voice sharp with worry. Master Longshan, aren't you sending him to his death? Shi Feng inclined his head serenely. Don't worry, Sister Qing. With Sister Yuyue at my side, I'll be more than fine. With that, he stepped into the swirling pink mist and offered his hand to Zhao Yoyue. Qing exhaled a shaky breath, but continued to glare at Longshan, demanding an explanation. The old master simply let a small smile play at his lips and replied, I want to see what he can truly do, and he won't die. Then he followed them into the haze, confident that Shi Feng would call for help if he ever ran into real danger. Feeling reassured, Qing hurried to join them. Outside the mist-choked chamber, the white-haired instructor quietly rolled a recliner into position at the entrance. He settled back, his eyes fixed on the roiling fog, ready to watch over the trial. Inside, Shi Feng walked to a natural stone ledge overlooking an eerie, glowing chasm and sat down with Zhao Yoyue. Around them, the air thrummed with latent power. After a moment's silence, Shi Feng turned to her. Yoyue, tell me, how strong is Gong Yin? Zhao Yuye's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light. Master, Gong Yin is also 11 years old, but his affinity with the soul arts is a touch weaker than mine. He's only reached the rank of a 22nd level Grand Soul Master. Shi Feng nodded thoughtfully, his expression calm and unreadable. He leaned forward, peering into the pink mist, prepared to begin the trial that would test them all. Shi Feng's martial soul manifested as a massive black bow. His first soul skill specialized in piercing enhancement, while the second, exploding arrow, could detonate on impact. An orphan by birth, he'd been taken in by the spirit hall as a child and raised among its ranks. Master, why did you kill Gong Yin? Zhao Yoyue asked, her tone cool. Because he was plotting against me behind my back. Shi Feng met her gaze calmly. Zhao Yoyue's almond-shaped eyes gleamed with anger. That traitor deserved his fate. Master, allow me to deal with any who stand against you. Shi Feng gently shook his head. No, we'll handle this together. I want to test our fusion arts. For a moment, Zhao Yoyue looked surprised. Then excitement flooded her features. Of course, Master, you truly are extraordinary to have such a loyal partner and such a beautiful aide at your side. From nearby came the rasping voice of the old man everyone called the Wretched Elder. Well said, boy. Not bad at all. He shuffled closer, a twisted smile on his lips. Shi Feng ignored him, but the elder only cackled with self-satisfaction. Look at this pink mist swirling around us, the elder crowed, waving a bowed, nigh hand at the air. I call it Pink Memories, my newest creation. Shi Feng frowned as the old man's silky voice drifted over to him. You haven't even touched the fun part yet. You can't imagine how many young men and women sneak away from their camps just for a taste of this endless illusion. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And if there's someone you like but can't quite reach, come to me. I don't charge much. Hehe. Qing flew to Shi Feng's side with a snort of outrage. Pervert, how dare you talk to a kid like that? Are you even human? The old man simply chuckled, but his smile faded the moment Qingqing glared at him. All right, boy, are you absolutely certain? He asked, turning his attention back to Shi Feng. Qingqing hovered protectively over Shi Feng as he answered. You can call me Shi Feng, and I'm 100% certain Gongyin must die. I see. Qingqing sat down firmly on the stone platform, crossing her arms. Then we'll be watching your performance closely. Nearby, Longshan and the others stood at the cliff's edge, leaning casually against the rocky outcrop but keeping their distance. The old man tilted his head and squinted beyond the fluttering pink mist that curled around them. Huh, he murmured. Looks like another little one's arriving. Shi Feng glanced up, straining to see through the haze, but felt no presence. 10 minutes later, a red-faced teenager burst through the swirling fog, panting as he skidded to a halt before the group. Chapter 77, The Terrifying Martial Soul Fusion Technique. All the instructors, Old Man Liu included, turned their eyes to the boy's groin. Impressive willpower, the old man murmured, nodding in approval. The others exchanged satisfied looks and offered him encouraging waves. At that moment, Wan Tianqi came rushing into the clearing. He'd forsaken his teammates after crossing the river with Zhao Yue, striking out on his own. Skidding to a halt, he was taken aback by the circle of onlookers. Then his gaze landed on Shi Feng and Zhao Yue standing side by side. Disappointment flashed across his face. He could accept being outrun by Zhao Yue, but who was this newcomer? When they crossed the river, Shi Feng had melted into the crowd, and in the swamp, he'd slipped away along a hidden route. Wan Tianqi had never seen the extent of his rival's strength. Now, watching Shi Feng appear here as if from nowhere, he felt a chill of surprise and a flicker of unease.